Chapter 181, The Strongest Person in Lant. Why are you coming with us again? William asked as he looked at Spencer, who was standing beside Wendy. I want to see the hometown of Sir William, Spencer replied. I will also not allow you to lay your hands on my little sister. I see, William nodded his head. He then turned his head towards the snot-nosed pansy who had his arms crossed over his chest. And your reason for joining us is? This was an order from my young master, Ian replied. I will witness the wedding in his place and present our gift to our seniors from the magic division. Right. William couldn't find any flaw in Ian's reply because Matthew and Leah were indeed ESD seniors. Also, the younger boy had consulted the two of them and asked for pointers several times on how to become a good head prefect for the magic division. EST needed to stay behind in order to monitor the magic division just in case they were dispatched for an emergency mission. Although the dungeon outbreaks were slowly getting under control, there was still a chance that the first years would need to be mobilized to provide aid. James didn't mind having more people with them and happily accepted to receive them as guests. He was extra courteous to Wendy and Spencer. William knew that his grandpa was thinking of having a private talk with Wendy again to discuss plans for marriage. Fortunately, Spencer was there to act as a buffer and prevent his gramps from having his way. When everyone was ready, the group used the Academy's teleportation gates to travel to the town closest to Lant. The Dean had approved of this request since James did help in subjugating the lair of the ancient queen and prevented the loss of more lives on the battlefield. After exiting the town, Blitz shrieked in the sky as John chanted an enlargement spell in order to increase its size. It only took 2 hours on Blitz's back before William saw the familiar town where he grew up. Wendy's and Spencer's eyes widened in surprise when they saw the Arabro, golden ape, that was seated not far away from the entrance of Lant. Soon, Blitz landed near the Ainsworth residence. John and Jekyll took their leave and returned to their own homes to rest. James had promised them sufficient compensation for helping him save his grandson and subjugate the dungeon. Helen, who saw them land near the mansion, hurriedly greeted them and hugged Matthew, Leah, and William with tears streaming down her face. I'm glad you are safe, young master, Helen said with a teary face. You, too, Leah. Sorry for worrying you, Aunt Helen, Matthew replied while looking apologetic. I'm back, Aunt Helen. Leah smiled. I'm also glad to see you. Helen nodded his head and patted William's head. Have you grown taller, little Will? A little bit, William admitted. Aunt Helen, let me introduce you to my friend, Wendy. Wendy, this is my Aunt Helen. She has taken good care of me since I was a baby. Hello, Wendy. Nice to meet you, Lady Helen. Just call me Aunt, Helen smiled. Since little Will and you are friends, then there's no need to be too courteous. Wendy nodded her head. Thank you, Aunt Helen. William then turned to look at the tag-along brother and reluctantly introduced him to his aunt. This is Wendy's older brother, Spencer, William said. He likes to eat grass, so make sure to give him some fresh hay every day, Aunt Helen. Spencer ignored William's words and greeted Helen politely like how nobles did. Helen greeted him in return before making a gesture for them to follow her back to the residence. Since Helen and Ian were already acquainted, there was no need for introductions between them. Matthew and Leah had just entered the door when an anxious Anna hugged both of them while crying tears of joy. A few minutes passed before Anna regained her composure. She apologized to their guests for showing them an embarrassing sight during their visit. After kissing Matthew, Leah, and William on the cheeks, Anna and Helen went into the kitchen to cook a feast. William was left to entertain their guests as Matthew and Leah took a nap in their rooms. They were still quite exhausted from their near-death experience and decided to rest for the time being. Later, I'll give all of you a tour of Lant, William said with a smile. Thank you, Wendy replied. She was currently seated on the couch and was petting Thor, who was lying on her lap. The husky had his eyes closed in satisfaction. Dia and Ragnar followed Ella outside the residence to visit the other goats that belonged to William's herd. Oliver had also snuck away to return to Celine's house in order to give her the souvenir he had found during his short vacation outside of Lant. I heard from my father that there was a town that survived the beast tide many years ago, and that town's name was Lant, Spencer stated as he looked at William with a serious expression. Is the Arabro the reason why none of the monsters dared to attack this town back then? There were only 4 of them in the living room because James went to see Owen to discuss everything that had happened while he was away. No, William shook his head. We were attacked by a wolf tide, but Gramps and the defenders of Lant managed to stop their advance. The Arabro that you saw outside of Lant was taken from the battle that took place at the Windkeep Citadel. Spencer pondered for a bit before asking the question that had been bothering him since he entered the small town in the countryside. Who is the strongest person in Lant? Spencer inquired. He was very curious about the power hierarchy of the only town that survived the disaster that happened many years ago. The strongest? William pondered for a while. In fact, he didn't know who the strongest person in Lant was. If it was a few years ago, he would have readily answered that his gramps, James, was the strongest. However, his master, Celine, had shown amazing combat abilities in the battle against the golden-scaled crocodile. Then there was also the town's dentist, Mr. Jekyll. William had a nagging feeling that the dentist was a very powerful expert that even surpassed James and Celine's battle prowess. In the end, William decided to play it safe and gave an answer based on his preference. My master is the strongest, William replied with a smug expression. I wouldn't make her my master if she was weak, you know. I want to meet your master, Will, Wendy said. Is it possible? I'll ask her later if she will agree to meet you, William answered. My master is quite very shy around people. Ian snorted when he heard the shepherd mention his beautiful elven master. The snot-nosed pansy was quite sensitive to magic power. When he first met Celine, he had already known that she was someone he didn't want to mess with, if possible. However, that didn't change the fact that Ian hated her. The first reason was because she enslaved William. Ian loathed enslavement more than anything in the world. He even made a vow to eliminate all the slave traders he came across when he became stronger. The second reason was the fact that Celine was extremely beautiful. Just the thought of Celine turning William into her boy toy irritated him to no end. He had also heard rumors in the capital that beautiful and handsome half-elves were sold to become the bed warmers of their new owners. In some cases, the nobles even exchanged their slaves with each other in order to promote better relationships in the noble circle. While Ian was deep in thought, Wendy and Spencer were looking forward to meeting William's master. They wanted to see the person who had trained the red-headed boy and made him the way he was now. Is your master really that strong? Wendy asked. Yes. Master is very strong. William nodded in affirmation. She single-handedly dealt with a golden-scaled crocodile and its lackeys. That is how strong she is. What is her profession? Spencer asked. Master? She's a William forcefully closed his mouth as sweat oozed on his forehead. He almost forgot that dark mages were banned in the southern continent. If he were to say that his master was a dark sorceress, he wasn't sure how his two guests would react. Ian was different. He already knew that Celine was a dark sorceress, so he didn't need to hide it from him. However, Wendy and Spencer were different. Although William trusted Wendy, he wasn't sure if Spencer was tight-lipped or not. Celine had explicitly told him about the prejudice that the common people held towards those who wield dark magic. Your master is a what? Wendy inquired. My master is a dancer, William hurriedly replied. She's a very good dancer. A dancer? Spencer frowned. Your master is a dancer. Spencer looked at William in doubt. Although some dancers were very strong fighters, their main profession was more in line with the realm of entertainment. He didn't believe that a dancer was capable of training William to become a strong warrior. Yes. My master is a dancer, William lied through his teeth. She's a beautiful elven dancer. Anyone who sees her dance would be charmed by how graceful and talented she is. The corner of Ian's lips twitched as he watched William's attempt to hide his master's true profession. Although Ian was tempted to tell the others the truth, he decided that it was not worth it to make Celine his enemy. After all, dark mages were banned from the southern continent for a reason. Chapter 182, Reincarnated with the strongest system. A dancer. Celine covered her luscious lips and chuckled. You told them I'm a dancer? Very funny, little Will. Sorry, master, William replied. I wasn't thinking properly at that time. Don't worry. Even if they ask me to dance, I won't do it. Celine propped her chin on the palm of her hands as she looked at her one and only disciple. Enough about that for now. Tell me everything that you have experienced in the academy. William could only give his master a stiff smile as he narrated the series of events that had happened to him in the academy. From the time he had taken the entrance test up to the point where Oliver helped him save the dungeon cores. Speaking of which, where are these dungeon cores? Celine asked. Rather, the souls of these dungeon cores. William glanced at Oliver and the latter just avoided his eyes. It seems that he didn't tell Celine everything that happened, so that William could tell her himself. After the twin cores used their energy to give birth to Dia, Thor, and Ragnar, they went into hibernation deep inside my sea of consciousness, William replied. Second Master said that they would sleep for a very long time, and it might take many years before they wake up. Celine nodded her head in understanding. She was also looking forward to meeting the mythical creatures born with the help of the dungeon cores, but William left them at the residence. Thor was with Wendy while Dia and Ragnar were playing with Eve. He didn't have the heart to take them with him when they were having fun, so he decided to visit Celine alone. Very well, you can bring your friends over tomorrow, Celine said with a smile. I also want to know them better, especially this girl called Wendy. Oliver told me that she likes you very much. William coughed lightly and gave Oliver the "how dare you betray me" gaze. The parrot monkey returned his gaze with a grin, and even added oil to the fire. From what I can tell, James has approved of the young lady as Little Will's potential bride candidate, Oliver commented. I just pity the poor girl because Little Will is a wolf in sheep's clothing. He will eat her up, including the bones. Really? Celine raised an eyebrow. Do you like her, William? Wendy is a beautiful and kind girl, it is almost impossible for anyone not to like someone like her, William answered. She did make her feelings clear to me, but right now, I'm still not ready to have a relationship. For now, we decided to start as friends. At least you're not pretending to be a dense protagonist. Master, I hate dense protagonists the most. The master and disciple pair stared at each other with a smile, before William decided to have a serious talk with Celine. Master, do you know the dean of the academy? William inquired. Let me guess, that old man told you something about my past after he saw your collar, correct? Celine asked back. Did he try to guilt trip you? Celine shook her head as she stood up from the chair and headed towards the couch to lay down. She then gave William a lazy gaze and motioned for him to come close to her. William carried his chair closer and sat in front of Celine. He hoped that his master would open herself up more to him after knowing the secret of the collar. Tell me everything that the old man told you, Celine ordered. Don't leave out any details. William nodded his head and complied. He told Celine everything and waited for her response. William, I asked you before you left Lont, but I'll ask again. Celine gave William a teasing smile. Do you resent me? Yes, William replied. On that day you enslaved me, master, I felt betrayed. Celine motioned for William to come closer and the boy complied once again. Celine caressed the side of his face and looked straight into his eyes. If you told me that you didn't feel any resentment, I would have thought that there was something very wrong with you. What I did to you is something that a master would never do to her disciple. In the past, I didn't have a choice either, Celine said as her hand moved downwards to touch the collar on William's neck. My grandfather asked the legendary blacksmith in the Silver Moon continent to make 2 mithril collars. One was for me, the other for my twin sister, Celeste. Celine frowned as if she remembered something unpleasant, but the frown on her face disappeared after a few seconds as she continued her explanation. At one point in time, my sister and I were forced to wear the collars on our necks. I apologize, but I cannot tell you the reason why because it is a secret. The beautiful elf sighed as she took away her hand from the collar on William's neck. My grandfather knows how to use dark magic and he was my first teacher. I won't bore you with the details of my training because you already know how it ended. Celine's eyes glowed light purple for a brief moment as a pang of hatred flashed across her beautiful eyes. When I reached the age of 12, my grandfather took me to the northern continent. There I was introduced to the most wretched-looking hag who had the heart of a saint. She treated me like a real daughter and gave me love more than my real mother ever did. There she taught me everything she knew about dark magic as well as how to wield the spear. She was the family I never had and I miss her terribly. With her guidance, I was able to step into the ranks of the dark sorceress. Celine closed her eyes as images of her past flooded her mind. Unfortunately, all the good, and the bad times, must come to an end. When I was 20 years old I had to say goodbye to my second mother and moved here in the southern continent. We still exchange letters at least twice a year, but I still miss her terribly. With that said, our circumstances are quite similar as well. The one who raised you was Ella, and I was raised by a hag. Celine grinned. Our only difference is that you still have a family here, while I only have Oliver to keep me company. And I will continue to accompany you, mistress, Oliver commented from on top of his perch. Even if you were to go to a sea of fire, I will always be by your side. Thank you, Oliver. You're welcome, mistress. Celine then shifted her attention to William. This time, she had a serious expression which she rarely showed to the red-headed boy. Don't apologize to me, because I won't apologize to you, Celine said. Even now, I still carry a lot of resentment in my heart, and I don't intend to forgive those who wronged me anytime soon. Whether you hate me or not, that is up to you to decide. So, my cute, little disciple, it is perfectly fine for you to hate me. Understood. William returned Celine's serious gaze with a smirk. Master, you already know that I hold grudges, correct? Yes, Celine answered. I promise that when I become stronger than you, I will settle our old debt, William stated. I will make sure to punish you properly. I hope when that day comes, you will not hate me, master. Punish me? You will have to be strong enough to do that. Celine sneered. Don't worry, master. I am destined to become strong. Very strong, William said in an arrogant manner. That's because I was reincarnated with the strongest system. The master and disciple stared at each other with devilish smiles. I look forward to seeing that day arrive, little Will. Celine caressed the side of William's face. Me, too, master, William replied as he placed his hand over hers. Me, too. Chapter 183, Promise Between Men. You must be William's friends, I am his master, Celine, Celine said with a smile. Just call me Lady Celine. It's a pleasure to meet the two of you. The next day after William and Celine had a heart-to-heart talk, he brought Wendy, Spencer, Ian, along with Dia, Thor and Ragnar to Celine's house. Aside from meeting his friends, his master was also very curious about the 3 mythical beasts that had become part of William's family. The pleasure is ours, Lady Celine, Wendy replied. Spencer was dazed by Celine's beauty and was not able to answer in time. Fortunately, Wendy's reply broke him from his trance and he immediately gave his greeting. It's an honor to meet Sir William's master, Spencer greeted. William had a smug look on his face when he saw Spencer's reaction. Celine was certainly a peerless beauty and only a handful of ladies in the southern continent could match her. Ian stared at his nemesis with a neutral expression. I've heard that William became the head prefect of the martial class in the Royal Academy. Is he doing a good job, or is he just lazing around? Celine inquired in a teasing tone. The head prefect is very capable, Lady Celine, Spencer replied. To this day, I never thought that a shepherd would be able to get the most sought-after position in the academy. It opened my eyes as to how vast the world is. I agree. Wendy nodded her head and gave the red-headed boy a sidelong glance. Will is a brave and competent leader. The way he led the charge on the battlefield will forever be etched on the hearts of the first years who were there that day. William raised his chin in arrogance and the corner of his lips rose higher. Clearly, he was enjoying the praises that the twins were saying about him. Ian was doing his best not to roll his eyes, and Celine gave her disciple a rare look of approval. Although Oliver had told her about William's heroics, hearing it from other people added to its credibility. William has always been a hard worker. Celine nodded her head. Although he can be quite dumb at times, he is still able to rise to the occasion when it really matters. Master, if you want to praise me, just remove the word dumb, William commented. As your disciple, it is only normal for me to be competent, right? Indeed. Celine agreed. As expected of my disciple. Wendy was paying close attention to Celine. For some reason, she was not feeling any kind of jealousy towards her. In fact, she wanted to know more about her. She didn't know why she felt this way, and it also puzzled her. What she didn't know was that Celine was paying close attention to her as well. Wendy was giving her an unusual feeling that she couldn't understand. The only thing she knew was that the feeling didn't hold any malice or negativity whatsoever. While the two girls were trying to feel each other out, Spencer decided to break the silence and ask the beautiful elf a question that had been nagging at his mind since yesterday. Lady Celine, William said that you were a dancer. Spencer looked at the beautiful elf with a serious expression. I've met a few of them and some of them are very capable fighters. Can you tell me what kind of weapon you specialize in? I specialize in wielding spears, Celine answered. Spears? What a coincidence. Wendy looked at Celine with starry eyes. The spear is also my main weapon. Can you give me a few tips on how to become more proficient in it? I suppose, Celine gave Wendy a sweet smile. It will also help me understand why I am feeling this way towards you. Can I also join? Spencer asked with interest. I'm also a spear wielder. It would be an honor to learn a few tips from Sir William's master. Celine's smile stiffened when she heard Spencer's request. The only one she wanted to get to know was Wendy and not her twin brother. Fortunately, William came to the rescue and prevented Spencer's advances on Celine. There's no need for master to teach you, Spencer, William interjected. I alone will be more than happy to teach you how to wield it. Why don't we go outside? I am itching to teach you a few tricks on how to raise your proficiency in spear mastery. William didn't wait for Spencer's reply and dragged the older boy outside the house. Ian also excused himself and followed Will. He didn't like to stay with Celine longer than necessary. The beautiful elf stood up from the couch and motioned for Wendy to follow her. They headed towards the basement where Celine's training room was located. Oliver, on the other hand, was pondering something important. He had discovered something unusual with Wendy, but he was not someone who liked to gossip about others' secrets. Celine knew Oliver's personality, so she didn't bother to ask him. Although it was troublesome, the elf had her own ways to find the answers to her questions. In a small grove located at the east of Lant, Leah and Matthew held each other's hands as they faced a man wearing a traveler's cloak. It was none other than Leah's and Cedric's father Sabas. I knew that this day would come, but I never expected it to come this soon, Sabas said as he looked at his daughter with gentle eyes. When he shifted his eyes on Matthew they became as sharp as a blade, but the latter didn't flinch and stared back with an unwavering gaze. Sabas stared at his future son-in-law and sighed in his heart. He didn't have any complaints about Leah marrying Matthew. Quite the opposite, he was quite satisfied with him. His only concern was whether the young man would be able to make his daughter happy. If you make my daughter cry, I swear that I'll beat the crap out of you, Sabas stated. Not even your grandfather can stop me from wiping the floor with your face. If that time comes then I won't resist, Matthew replied. If I am not even capable of making Leah happy then I definitely deserve a beating. Remember those words. I will hold you accountable for them. I will. I promise. Leah watched the confrontation between her father and her lover with a smile on her face. She knew that both men truly loved her, and she was touched by their show of affection. Leah, take care of yourself. Sabas walked towards his daughter and gave her a hug. After your wedding, I'll go to the central continent to take a look at your older brother. I'm worried about him. Leah nodded as she rested her head on her father's chest, just like she had always done in the past. I'm also worried about Big Brother. I hope that he's doing well. Cedric is still inexperienced and I'm afraid that people will take advantage of him. Sabas reluctantly let his daughter go and took a step back. I just hope that he found some good friends when he enrolled at Everwinter Academy. Father, are you going to show yourself to Big Brother? In a few years. I want your big brother to be more independent. If I show up to him now, he might revert to his old self and that would only hinder his growth. I will send letters to you from time to time. Feel free to tell me if you get mistreated by the Ainsworths. Leah nodded her head as she fought off the tears that she had been holding back. Sabas looked at his daughter and patted her head one more time before walking away. However, after reaching his 10th step, Sabas stopped and turned his head to look at the two lovers. Matthew, you don't have to hurry to give me a granddaughter, Sabas said. Wait at least 2 more years. Leah is still young. Also, I think that now is not a good time to have a child. There are things happening here in the Helan kingdom that look fishy to me. Sabas paused as he stared in the direction of the Helan capital. The beast tide and the dungeon outbreaks may be connected to each other. I'm afraid that it is just the beginning of something bigger. Until this danger passes, it would be best to hold off on having children. It's not too late to have them when everything has settled down. Leah's father gave them one last glance before disappearing deeper inside the grove. He would wait until his daughter was safely married to Matthew before leaving the southern continent. Although he felt that something was amiss, he was confident that James would be able to protect his daughter. This was why he could leave Leah without any worries as he concentrated on his eldest son who was currently in the central continent. The place where all the major powers of the world congregated. A place where constant wars, big and small, took place. Chapter 184, You May Now Kiss the Bride. 4 days passed since William returned to Lant and the preparations for the wedding were in full swing. The small town became lively and everyone gathered to join in the festivities. The hunters hunted for big and small game for the feast that was about to come. Matthew was the heir of their current lord, Mordred. This made his wedding a big event. The old towns of Fuchsia and Zinar were now under the jurisdiction of Lant and being overseen by James' subordinates. After the beast tide, several refugees sought protection from the only town that had survived in the western region. Because of this, the population of the two towns grew and had even reached half of their original population. Naturally, as subjects of the overlord of Lant, the people there also decided to join the festivities in order to show their support to their current steward. However, just as everyone was completing the finishing touches, a messenger from the king arrived in Lant and told Mordred that the king would bestow a peerage upon James. This noble title was the reward that the king had decided to bestow on James for his participation in the Beast Tide invasion at Windkeep Citadel and his help in subjugating the dungeon outbreak in the Duchy of Aberdeen. However, since James had passed his rule on his son, Mordred, the peerage naturally fell into his hands. A/N, the Baronet of Lant is Mordred since James had retired from his position. Naturally, Mordred would need to go to the capital in order to formalize the bestowment of his peerage. However, he was not in a hurry. He would accompany William, Matthew, Leah, and the rest, back to the capital and just meet the king afterwards. The western region was still in a state of recovery. Even though some of the lands had been claimed, there were still a few without any owners. The king needed some trusted people to oversee these lands. He wanted these lands to be cultivated in order to help the kingdom recover financially through trades of goods and resources. The towns of Lant, Fuchsia, and Zinar, combined, were big enough for someone with the title of Viscount to manage. This was also a major factor that affected the king's decision. If he were to make Mordred a marquess, then he would definitely encounter staunch opposition from the nobles of the kingdom. His original plan was to make Mordred an earl, but after giving it more thought, he decided to play it safe and just settled for Viscount. When this news arrived in Lant, William gave his gramps 2 thumbs up in his heart. He was amazed at how James was able to secure benefits while doing as he pleased. Naturally, the townspeople became ecstatic with the news because Mordred's inherited rank was only that of a baronet. Leah didn't want to have a grand wedding, but her future husband's position was a bit special. Because of this, she didn't have a choice and allowed herself to be dressed up by an over-enthusiastic Anna and Helen. How envious, Wendy said as she looked at the white dress that Leah would be wearing for her wedding. Why are you envious? Spencer asked. When you get married, your wedding will be grander than this. Wendy gave William a sidelong glance, while blushing. This gave Spencer a headache because his sister's feelings for William remained strong even though the latter asked her to start their relationship as friends. William, on the other hand, was feeling at peace. After he had his talk with Celine, the guilt in his heart had been cleared up. He had also considered Wendy's feelings for him, and had a private talk with her before they left Celine's house. If your feelings don't change after my duel with Rebecca, then we can discuss taking the next step in our relationship, William said with a serious expression. Until then, it would be best if we get to know each other first. Also, bear in mind that I might have multiple wives in the future. If you are fine with having a scumbag like me as your boyfriend, then I will seriously consider making you my girlfriend. William had made it clear to her that he was not a gentleman who would only have one love in his life. This way, Wendy would know exactly what she could expect if she decided to have a serious relationship with William. Instead of answering William, she just nodded her head. Wendy also wanted to know if the feelings she had for William were real, or if it was just the result of having been saved by him while inside the goblin crypt. Spencer is right, I'm sure that the man that Wendy is going to marry is a very lucky guy, William commented with a smile. Wendy blushed and averted her gaze, which made Spencer click his tongue in irritation. He was really dissatisfied with Wendy's current infatuation with William. The next day, hundreds of people stopped their daily routines and lined up in the center of the town of Lant. Matthew was standing on a raised platform along with Owen as he stared at the northern gate of Lant. William and Eve rode Ella's back as the little girl dug her hands inside the basket in front of her that was filled with flowers. She threw them on the ground while giggling, which made the scene quite endearing. Right behind Ella, several teenage beauties from Lant walked while throwing flower petals as well. Not far from them, a beautiful young lady wearing a white dress walked while carrying a bouquet. Her midnight blue hair was tied up in a princess-style braid as she walked elegantly to where her man was waiting for her. Although her face was covered by a veil, everyone knew how beautiful she was. When she finally reached the platform, Matthew extended his hand to hold her in his embrace. Owen, the life magus of Lant, was the master of ceremonies. He raised his hand in order to quiet the crowd, so he could start the marriage ceremony. We are gathered here today to witness the union of Leah Terrell and Matthew von Ainsworth, Owen said. With the power vested in me by my sacred order, I ask you, Matthew von Ainsworth, do you pledge to honor Leah Terrell with your life, to love, and cherish, today and every day, for the rest of your life? I do, Matthew answered. I ask you, Leah Terrell, do you pledge to honor Matthew von Ainsworth with your life, to love, and cherish, today and every day, for the rest of your life? I do, Leah answered. Owen raised the ceremonial staff in his hand. Bow to the heavens and earth, Owen ordered. Leah and Matthew bowed towards the north. Bow to honor the gods, Owen ordered. Leah and Matthew bowed towards the south. Lastly, bow towards each other, Owen ordered. Matthew and Leah bowed to each other. With the gods and the citizens of Lant as my witness, I now pronounce you husband and wife, Owen declared with a smile. You may now kiss the bride. Matthew gently parted Leah's veil and gave her a long and passionate kiss. A round of cheering and whistling reverberated through the town as the citizens showered their future lords with their blessings. James laughed out loud while patting Mordred's shoulder. Mordred held Anna's hand as the latter leaned her head on her husband's shoulder. Tears streamed down from her eyes, not out of sadness, but of happiness, for her eldest son had finally found the love of his life, like she did, many years ago. William watched this scene with a big smile on his face as he held his adorable cousin in a protective embrace. Not far from him, Celine, stood wearing a beautiful dress and veil. She usually doesn't join such festivities, but this time she made an exception. James and the people of Lant had been good to her, so she deemed that it was necessary to participate in Matthew's wedding ceremony. Wendy, Spencer, and Ian joined the others as they applauded the newlyweds. Everything was going smoothly when suddenly, dark clouds covered the sky, and thunder roared in the heavens. A strong gust of wind blew over the town of Lant which immediately put a stop to the cheering. Everyone looked up in the sky and saw 3 giant black bats with blood-red eyes staring at them as they flapped their wings. Standing on top the bats were 3 people wearing hooded robes. Just one glance and one could tell that they didn't come to give well wishes to the bride and groom. A wedding? Looks like we came at the wrong time, one of the hooded people, who was standing on the giant bat on the right, said with a cheerful voice. Actually, we came at the right time, the man in the middle chuckled. I like weddings. It is the perfect opportunity to snatch the bride and ravage her in front of her groom. The hooded person standing on the left raised his hand and a dark orb of magic manifested above him. We will all give you 2 choices, the hooded person shouted. The first is to submit to us and follow our bidding. The other? Die without a full corpse. Now choose. Matthew stepped in front of Leah in order to block the lascivious gaze of the hooded man looking at his wife. Owen stepped forward and positioned himself in front of Matthew. Deep down, the old man was sneering. He wondered if the 3 idiots' heads had been kicked in by donkeys. Fortunately, the wedding had just ended. If they came while they were in the middle of the ceremony, the 3 bastards would have definitely suffered a fate worse than death. Celine looked at the 3 intruders in disdain. If they had attacked any of the other towns in the western region, then their chances of succeeding were very high. The only problem was that they were only a bunch of small fries that had unknowingly stepped inside a lion's den. Father, let me handle them, Mordred said with a devilish smile. Ha ha ha, there are 3 of them, James replied. You can handle 1. I'll handle 2. William, who was seated on Ella's back, had the same devilish smile that was on Mordred's and James' faces. The thunder and lightning in the heavens rumbled and made William feel that it was a good opportunity to vent out some frustrations. System, change my job class to Prince of Thunder. Job class has been successfully changed. I am looking forward to seeing some fireworks. William's smile grew wider when he felt the power of lightning within the dark clouds answer his call. He had long awaited the day when he could test the power of the prestige class, but his lack of mana, and encounters, prevented him from doing so. With such a golden opportunity in front of him, William was dying to send the 3 morons to Kingdom Come. Chapter 185, Thunder God's Wrath. Look, they're so afraid that they've become speechless. The man in the middle of the formation laughed. I call dibs on the bride. You 2 can just choose among the womenfolk. I came here to complete the mission, not indulge in carnal desires, the man wielding dark magic replied as he focused his attention on the people on the ground. I don't care what you do, just don't get in the way of the operation. I hope there's someone strong, the hooded man on the right commented. The other towns didn't even have strong fighters. Conquering them was boring. As he said these words, a swarm of bats flew from the east and circled around Lant like a red cloud. They numbered in the thousands and their red eyes glowed eerily in the darkness. It reminded William about the time when the dire wolves attacked them in the valley. Back then he was still a weakling who only knew how to hide behind the strength of his mama and the other adults. Now, he eyed the bat swarm with keen interest and he had only one thing on his mind. That's a lot of experience points, William mused. I'd better not miss this opportunity. Gramps and the others will definitely capture these idiots and interrogate them later. For now, I need to make sure that the small fries don't get away. William used his appraisal skill and checked the monsters that were presented to him as a sacrifice. Red-eyed Screecher Bat. Vampire Bat. Threat level, B, mid. Uses powerful supersonic attacks in order to neutralize its prey before going for the kill. Resistant to dark magic. A species of vampire bat that thrives in places where high concentration of miasma can be found. Red-winged vampire lings. Vampire Bat. Threat level, E, low. With a wingspan of 2 feet, this vampire bat usually hunts in groups in order to take down bigger prey. Its fangs carry a mild paralyzing venom that it uses to incapacitate its prey. A species of vampire bat that lives in places where death and decay abound. Although they are only Class E, they make up for their weakness through sheer numbers, William smirked. Well, it's fine. They're free experience points anyway. William caressed the side of Ella's neck in order to pass his message to her. Having been together for many years, the Angorian goat already knew what William was thinking. She moved away from the crowd and went to the southern side of Lant where the number of people was scarce. Celine noticed her disciple's movements, but didn't do anything to stop him. The beautiful elf just told Oliver via telepathy to watch over the boy just in case something unexpected came up. Celine was quite interested in the identity of the 3 people who dared to attack Lant. She wondered if they were part of the organization that she had joined, or part of a separate one. The senior members knew that she was staying in Lant, so she doubted that they would send these small fries to annoy her. However, the possibility existed. Her only concern was if these members were sent here by the organization, it meant that she couldn't interfere with them. This was a very strict rule among its members, and Celine had made an oath to follow this rule. It doesn't matter, Celine sneered. I don't even need to lift a finger in order to deal with these fools. As if waiting for that moment, a dragon's roar erupted from where Mordred stood. He shot into the air clad in flames and took on the form of a fire dragon. James stood on Mordred's back and looked at the three intruders with a wide grin. Deep down he was very furious because these three numbskulls disrupted his grandson's happy event. He planned to capture them alive and torture them until they regretted the day they were born. Should we join, too? John asked as he looked at the sky. No need. Trent, who was standing beside him, said as he crossed his arms over his chest and stared at the swarm of bats with interest. Too bad they're in the air. Marcus rubbed his chin in disappointment. I kinda want to join the action. Several of the masters of Lant also feel the same way. They were quite annoyed that their festivities had been ruined by these three gatecrashers. On a hill overlooking Lant, William held Eve securely in place as he sat on Ella's back. Flashes of lightning bolts snaked within his pupils as his lips moved to utter a chant. When dark clouds hang on the horizon, and the roar of the heavens announce their presence, it is now time for me to break the silence. Lightning ever weaving, thunder ever seeking, I call upon you now. A deafening roar of thunder shook the sky and lightning bolts snaked the heavens like wild dragons, waiting for the call of their lord. William raised his right hand and pointed at the swarm of bats in the distance. Oliver observed this scene with a curious gaze as he sat on a tree branch. The power I wield would obliterate one and all, William said as his eyes glowed with power. Pierce through the darkness and hear my call. Thunder God's wrath. Like a clap of thunder, William's words echoed through the dark sky. A blinding flash of light illuminated the battlefield and everyone was forced to cover their eyes due to its radiance. What followed next was an ear-deafening rumbling that descended from the heavens. Evade! James shouted. Mordred hurriedly nosedived to the ground to escape the unexpected rain of lightning bolts that came out of nowhere. A stray lightning bolt snaked towards them, but James calmly swatted it aside with his giant axe. His eyes glowed in wonder and disbelief at the scene that was happening in front of his eyes. It was then when the image of a young boy with red hair and light green eyes flashed briefly inside his mind. Could it be? James thought in disbelief. Is this William's doing? Unlike James, who had dealt the lightning bolt calmly, the three villains were caught completely by surprise. Fortunately, they were strong enough to resist the lightning bolts, but they were injured pretty badly. Their mounts, the red-eyed screecher bats, on the other hand, shrieked in pain as the rain of lightning hit them left, right, and center. Although their bodies were strong, getting assaulted by dozens of lightning bolts still left them helpless. Soon, the screecher bats crashed to the ground after being mercilessly assaulted by lightning bolts. As for the bat swarm, they fared no better. In fact, almost all of them were obliterated when the lightning storm descended. Any bat that was grazed by a lightning bolt burst into flames and illuminated the dark sky with their fiery blaze. The citizens of Lant looked at the blazing sky in awe as the threat that once presented itself was burned away before their very eyes. Owen had erected a barrier on the ground to prevent any of the citizens from getting hit by stray lightning bolts. Several of the experts of Lant worked in tandem to ensure that none of their people got hurt in the crossfire. Meanwhile, on the hill overlooking the incident, sweat streamed down the side of William's face as he looked at the devastation he'd caused. This was the first time he had used the power of the Prince of Thunder and he wasn't expecting that it would be this destructive. For a brief moment, William thought that he had seen a glimpse of what the end of the world would look like, if it were to really happen. The lightning storm didn't differentiate from friend or foe and simply struck everything within striking range. Fortunately, Barbados had remodeled the defenses of Lant and activated a protective shield that was further strengthened by Owen's magical barrier. Next time I use this, I better ensure that no one is around, William thought as he patted Eve's head. The little girl got scared of the thunder and lightning and was currently bawling her eyes out on William's chest. The bat swarm only had a tenth of its original number by the time the effects of the skill subsided. The survivors screeched anxiously as they flew away in haste. Gained EXP, 270,000. Name, William von Ainsworth. Race, half-elf. Health points, 5,500/5,500. Mana, disabled. Job class, Shepherd, LVL 30. Subclass, Prince of Thunder, LVL 17. Strength, 55, plus 10. Agility, 50, plus 10. Vitality, 30, plus 10. Intelligence, 60, plus 10. Dexterity, 45, plus 30. Stats EXP, 77,391/438,257. Prince of Thunder LVL 17. Job class EXP, 26,849/60,854. By using the passive ability Child of Thunder, William was able to manipulate the lightning storm to do his bidding. Since he didn't have any mana at the moment, he could only use external sources to activate the power of his job class. The result, however, had exceeded his expectations. William decided to be more mindful of his surroundings when using this extremely powerful and destructive skill. What he didn't know was that, aside from Oliver, someone else had witnessed his display of power. After the initial shock had faded, the pair of eyes observing the boy became serious. After an internal debate, the figure retreated and returned to where everyone was congregated. Clearly, that person didn't want William to know that one of his secrets had been exposed while he was busy dealing with the fools who dared to step inside his territory. I'd better report this, the person thought. His Excellency has to know. The person stood beside the confused crowd and acted like nothing had happened. There was a right time for everything, and leaving the town of Lant was a priority. Everything else could wait until then. Chapter 186, When was the last time you boys brushed your teeth? Start talking, James said as he looked at the three people who were acting in an arrogant manner when they first arrived. Their hair was a mess, their clothes in tatters, and burn marks could be seen on their skin. Although they survived William's A.O.E attack, they still suffered due to its ferocity. A/N, area of effect, AoE. You fools! You will all regret this, the skinny man with brown hair and eyes glared at James and the men behind him. You think this little town can handle the wrath of our organization? If you let us go now, we can still turn a blind eye to this incident. He is right, the man with an eye patch looked at James with a serious expression. It will be folly to antagonize our organization. Our members are not something a bunch of country bumpkins could trifle with. Only the dark mage looked at James with a frown. As a wielder of magic, he was very sensitive to strong presences and right now, he was in front of not only one, but several strong people. People that were far stronger than him. I see, so you don't want to talk, James replied with a smile. That's fine. Jekyll, I'll let you handle them. Ha ha ha, this is going to be fun, Jekyll commented as he looked at the three people with a wide grin. James and the others left the room and allowed the dentist of Lant to handle the interrogation. Among them, no one could compare to Jekyll when it came to making people talk, including Ezio. They were confident that they would get their answers in less than an hour after Jekyll was finished with them. The two people looked at Jekyll with a sneer. They were still thinking that the prim, proper, handsome, smiling man in front of them was just there to intimidate them. This was not the first time they had experienced an interrogation and most of those interrogators all had the same ending and that was death. Jekyll calmly took a chair and sat in front of the captives with a smile. Tell me, when was the last time you boys brushed your teeth? Jekyll asked. The man wearing an eye patch spat on Jekyll and his spit landed on the dentist's well-ironed pants. The skinny man laughed due to his comrade's actions and did the same. His spit landed on Jekyll's clothes, which made the dentist's smile widen. I guess I need to give the two of you a crash course on proper dental hygiene, Jekyll commented with a smile. Soon, loud, begging, cries for forgiveness resounded inside the room. The dark magician closed his eyes and gritted his teeth because he couldn't stomach what he was seeing. If possible, he also wanted to cover his ears, but his arms were firmly tied behind his back. The only way he could keep his sanity was to close his eyes and use his willpower to endure the horrible screams beside him. He was already regretting coming to this backward place with the intention of lording over the newly built territories on the western edges of the Hellan kingdom. I hope Jekyll doesn't break them, Owen said as he blew circles of smoke with his pipe. I don't want to waste my potions on these lowlives. James just smiled at the stingy life magus complaint. How are the townspeople? James inquired. Have they calmed down? Don't worry about them, Owen waved his hand casually. They are currently enjoying the grand feast that our hunters prepared. I'm sure that this whole incident will just turn into gossip in the future. That's good. James nodded. I hope that my grandson and new daughter-in-law will not mind this small incident and enjoy their honeymoon. Dwayne, who was drinking some alcohol at the side, grinned. Commander, are you perhaps very excited to hold your great-grandchild? Indeed. But, I will still have to wait a few years before that happens. James sighed. He had promised Sabas to wait until Leah was at least 20 years old before allowing the two of them to conceive a child. The overly protective father didn't want his daughter to suffer the same fate his wife did when she gave birth to Cedric. James also cared about Leah's well-being so he readily agreed to Sabas' request. He also understood that both of them were still young. They were still studying in the Hellan Royal Academy and having a baby should be postponed for a little while longer. As the three men waited for the result of Jekyll's interrogation, William and the others were enjoying the feast at the center of the town. Although the guests from Fuchsia and Zinar were shaken, the original inhabitants of Lant treated the incident like it was just a passing cloud in the sky. After experiencing two beast tides, the people of Lant were not easily ruffled by sudden attacks on their hometown. Where did you go earlier, Will? Wendy asked. When those scary men appeared, I looked for you, but you were nowhere to be found. William finished chewing the apple inside his mouth before answering Wendy's question. It was a dangerous situation, and I decided to evacuate in order to protect Eve from harm. Those men were stronger than us and it was not a good idea to confront them head-on. Spencer, who was seated beside his sister, looked at William with a serious expression. Your uncle and grandfather were amazing. I heard that they helped in subjugating the dungeon in the Duchy of Aberdeen, but seeing them in action was truly something to behold. William raised his chin in an arrogant manner. My grandpa cracks coconuts with his bare hands. Handling a few small fries is not a big deal to him. You should have seen how he faced off against a millennial beast. That scene gave me goosebumps. Ian was already used to William's narcissistic bragging and turned a deaf ear to his words. He busied himself in eating the delicious dishes that were prepared by the hunters of Lant. Although the capital didn't lack high-class dishes, the local delicacies he was currently eating gave him a more homely feeling and they reminded him of his own hometown. I hope father and mother are doing well, Ian thought as he took another bite of a dish that William had called curry. The red-headed boy even bragged that he was the one who cooked it yesterday. He added that curry tasted better if it was eaten at a later time, so he prepared it the night before in order to bring out its true flavor. I wish I could stay longer, Wendy said with a sad expression. Aunt Anna, Aunt Helen, Uncle Mordred and Grandpa James are all good people. They are very warm and kind. Also, Lady Celine was really an expert when it comes to wielding a spear. I learned a lot from her. William, who was currently tempting Dia to eat the apple in his hand, looked at Wendy with gentle eyes. You can always come and visit them anytime you like. I'm sure that Gramps and the others will welcome you with open arms. Can I? Wendy looked back at him with a serious expression. Can I really come and visit them anytime? Of course. Good. Then I'll come and play with Eve again when there is an opportunity. Wendy's mood was lifted due to William's words and she handed a drumstick to Thor in order to reward him for being a good boy. Ragnar was currently eating a steak on a wooden plate beside William's feet. Although they only grew stronger by eating beast cores, it was perfectly fine for them to eat ordinary foods as well. I'm still curious, Spencer gave William an inquiring gaze. Just who are those men? Do they have comrades? If yes, this needs to be reported to the capital and fast. You don't have to worry about that, William replied. Uncle Mordred will be going with us back to the capital. He will deliver the news to His Majesty while waiting for his peerage to be bestowed upon him. That's good to hear. Spencer nodded. He once again stared at his head prefect for a brief moment before focusing on the food on his plate. Whatever thoughts he had on his mind right now, he hid it behind a calm facade. After the festivities, James called William to his room that night to talk about important matters. You're the one that manipulated that lightning storm, right? James asked. William nodded his head because there was no use hiding the secret to his grandfather. Is this the first time you have done such a thing? Yes. James sighed and massaged his forehead. William, what you did was dangerous. Fortunately, the defenses that we installed in Lont kicked in right away. Also, the veterans were present so the damage was minimal. No one also got injured because Owen and the rest acted fast enough. If you had chosen a different occasion to use that ability, I'm afraid that we might have suffered casualties on our side. James said this in a calm manner, but William's guilt was enough for him to feel ashamed of his actions. He didn't think ahead when he used the skill Thunder God's Wrath. All he wanted to do was to take the opportunity to test his ability. I'm sorry, Grandpa, William replied. I will be more careful in the future. James didn't punish William because he knew that his grandson was truly repenting for his actions. However, there was one more thing that he had to make sure of no matter what. Were there any witnesses when you used that skill? Only Eve, but I doubt that she was aware of what was happening. James nodded his head and only reminded William not to recklessly use the power of lightning again, especially when in public. After all, this was a secret that they had to keep until William became strong enough to protect himself. 3 days later, the group including the newlyweds returned to the Hellan capital along with Mordred. Although their honeymoon only lasted a few days, the two people radiated happiness which made William envious. Wendy chatted with Leah from time to time while giving sneaking glances at William from time to time. The two girls would giggle every now and then, which made William feel his stomach churn for some unknown reason. They were currently on the back of Blitz and were flying towards the nearest town where a teleport gate was stationed. From there, they would teleport straight to the capital. When they arrived at the capital city, Gladiolus, Mordred escorted the children to the academy before going to the castle to meet the king. Before they left, James had given Mordred a confidential letter. The information that they squeezed out from their captives was quite alarming that James decided to share the information with the king. He hoped that the Hellan kingdom still had some forces left in order to deal with the new threat that they were about to face. Chapter 187, Order of the Anglo-Ryan War Sovereign Part 1. In a private room used to entertain special guests in the palace, Mordred sat in front of the ruler of the Hellan kingdom, King Noah Ernest VI Hellan. Are you sure this information is credible? King Noah asked after reading James' letter. His silver-grey eyes looked at Mordred with a serious expression. That is the information we received from the people who attacked Lont, Mordred answered. We used a special method to extract the information so we can guarantee that the captives weren't lying. Of course, that doesn't mean that the information they gave us is true. They can be just disposable pawns that were thrown away in order for us to learn of this information. Whether to believe this information or not is up to you to decide, Your Majesty. For James and Mordred, they didn't really care whether the news was true or not. Their only concern was whether it would affect Lont or not. After a discussion among the experts of Lont, they decided to pass the information to the king, so he could take appropriate countermeasures to handle the problem. The other man present inside the room was the Grand Archmage of the Hellan Kingdom, Emrys. He had a frown on his face as he read James' letter, and one could tell that the contents of it were not good. My king, if what is written in the letter is true then that explains the movement of the Anisha and Zealand dynasties on our borders. Emrys sighed. Although I don't know how they're doing it, they are doing a good job at chipping away the armed forces of our kingdom. Noah nodded absent-mindedly at Emrys' comment. The beast tide and the dungeon outbreak had greatly diminished the military might of the Hellan kingdom. If the two dynasties on their borders decided to attack them during their moment of weakness, the Hellan kingdom wouldn't be able to resist their combined forces. What do you suggest that we do? Noah asked his loyal advisor. Emrys stroked his beard as he pondered. The kingdom of Frisia is our ally, but they are too far away to offer assistance. It would be best to alert them of our current situation and have them prepare for the worst. As long as the two dynasties don't use all of their military might to suppress us, we may still have a chance. The king of Frisia is no fool. He knows that if we fall, his kingdom will be the next target of the two dynasties. Noah nodded his head in understanding. So you mean to say, have them use us as a deterrent so that our two friendly neighbors don't use their full strength to attack us in fear that they will get stabbed in the back, correct? Yes, Your Majesty, Emrys replied. This is the only thing we can do right now. The losses we have received from the constant monster outbreaks are nearing half of the kingdom's overall strength. We even had to resort to asking the children to help resist the dungeon outbreaks that are currently spreading across the land. Noah bit his lips in frustration. Indeed. The kingdom was really nearing its limit. Because of the losses they suffered, they had no choice but to conscript the students who were still studying in the various institutions in the kingdom. Many seeds had already fallen due to this incident and it was truly heartbreaking. Aside from notifying our ally, is there anything else that we can do? Noah asked. Well, there is one more thing we can try, but I doubt that it will work. The Grand Archmage gave Mordred a sidelong glance before shifting his attention to the king. We need the help of the northern tribes. If they are willing to give their support, then we will be able to resist an invasion. Noah had a troubled expression when Emrys mentioned the tribes in the north of their kingdom. These tribes were given free reign on their lands and were technically not citizens of the Hellan kingdom. The reason why they were not included in the kingdom was because the former kings weren't able to conquer their lands. This proved how strong these tribes were, and the best thing they could do was to sign a non-aggression pact with them. These tribes did what they wanted to do, and the Hellan kingdom couldn't interfere. Of course, this also meant that the tribes couldn't invade the lands of the Hellan kingdom as well. They were more like the neighbor next door that they couldn't afford to offend. The oath both sides took was a powerful one and the main reason why there was a lasting peace between the two factions. Let me think about this first, Noah answered after some time. For now, alert the Sword Saint and tell him to observe our borders. As you wish, my king. Emrys bowed and left the room. Mordred was quietly sipping his tea at the side. He was perfectly fine pretending that he didn't hear the conversation between the king and the Archmage. Noah looked at his future Viscount with a helpless expression. He knew more than anyone that the Ainsworth family didn't plan to interfere with matters of the state. Even if he made Mordred a Viscount, he wouldn't actively help the kingdom resist the invasion. After all, he was the one who exiled one of their family members to never step foot in the Hellan kingdom ever again. It seems that all of you didn't slack on your training while I was gone, William said with a smile. Very good. As expected of the Martial Division. A day after he returned to the academy, William announced that he would be making an important announcement and all the students of the martial class were required to attend. The students who numbered just slightly over 300 looked at their head prefect with solemn expressions. Kenneth, Priscilla, Dave, Spencer, Drake, and Conrad were standing behind William. They were the officers he chose among the batch of students to form his council. The reason why I called you here today is to announce the name of our order. William scanned the faces of the students who were looking back at him. From this day onwards, by the power vested in me as the head prefect of the Martial Division, I hereby declare the founding of the Anglo-Ryan War Sovereign. James had already told William about the impending danger that would befall the Hellan kingdom if the information they gathered from their captives proved to be true. Because of this, William had decided to speed up his plan to create his own fighting force before the academy would dismantle the ranks of the students in order to join a possible war with the two neighboring kingdoms. With all due respect, sir, a teenage boy raised his hand as he looked at William with a serious expression. I don't think that forming an unauthorized organization is allowed within the Hellan Royal Academy. We might get suspended by the dean if he finds out about this. Some of the nobles nodded their heads in agreement. This meeting that they were currently having was a private one and no instructors were present. It was as if William was planning to stage a coup d'état and take over the entire academy. If anyone were to find out about this action, all of them might get punished. Yes, what you say is true. William nodded his head. That is why I won't force any of you to join. If any of you don't want to participate in this undertaking, feel free to leave this hall right now. Don't worry, I promise that I won't do anything to harm any of you who chose not to be part of my order. The students glanced at each other, but none of them moved from their spot. After following William's strict training regimen, they noticed significant changes in their martial prowess. Although they were afraid that they might get in trouble for forming a secret order inside the school, William's charisma had won them over. Even so, they didn't say anything and stayed where they stood. Some of them had a nagging feeling that if they really left the room right now, they would regret it for the rest of their life. Kenneth and the other officers were shocked by William's sudden declaration because they were not told anything beforehand. They knew how serious this undertaking was and they were wondering if the red-headed boy was really serious or just joking around. William was surprised when nobody left the hall. He was expecting that at least half of the students would leave. Seeing that nobody was planning to go, he decided to proceed with his speech. So, none of you want to leave? William asked. Since this is the case, I want all of you to sign a contract and you will sign it with your blood. This is your last chance to back out. Once you sign the contract, I will do everything in my power to make all of you strong. However, you are duty-bound to stand by my side. Whether we are going to face a mountain of fire or a sea of knives, none of you are allowed to retreat. Think carefully and think well. I'll give you all exactly 10 minutes to decide. William placed his hands behind his back as he waited for the 10 minutes to end. He was not afraid even if the academy dean found out about his plan or not. His grandpa had already made the necessary arrangements when he gave the letter to his uncle Mordred. The die has been cast and whether the king approved it or not, was up to him to decide. Chapter 188, Order of the Anglo-Ryan War Sovereign Part 2. Your family is really good at giving me a headache, the king said with a helpless tone. Thank you for your praise, your majesty. Noah rubbed his temples as he looked at Mordred who was happily eating a slice of cake. There was a condition attached to the letter that Mordred had given him. In exchange for the information, he was to allow the forming of a private order within the Hellan Academy led by none other than William von Ainsworth. James added that without the information, the Hellan kingdom would have been taken by storm, if the two dynasties outside their borders were to launch an attack without warning. Because of this, Noah was currently stuck between a rock and a hard place. If he chose not to agree to the condition then it means that the Ainsworths would no longer support the kingdom in any which way in the future. If he chose to agree then the nobles would start yapping and raise a ruckus. Both were equally troublesome, but the last paragraph in James' letter made Noah reluctantly agree to the condition. If you don't agree, then I promise that you will regret it. Only a single sentence. Noah had seen this sentence many times during his reign and he ignored each and every one of them. However, when it came to this particular old man, he had to take it seriously. Noah knew that deep inside, James had grievances with him. When the king exiled James' son, Morgan, from the kingdom, the old man started to give Noah the cold shoulder. William's grandpa, James, served the former king and they were very close. The former king even wanted to make James a duke, but the latter declined and only settled for the lowest rank of baronet before leaving for the farthest edge of the western region. There he built a small town, and stayed there ever since. Far from the politics of the king and the nobles. Only the old generation knew of how formidable he was, and all of them could attest that he was the last person they wanted to mess with. Only the next generation, like Rebecca's father, were unaware of how influential James could be. All it would take for James to silence them forever was to lift a finger, and it would be done. The only reason why Rebecca's father was still alive was because of the old fox Lawrence. He and James were good friends and had been on the battlefield together. In order to give him face, James decided to let them off the hook. If the tribes were the overlords of the north, then James was the hidden dark lord of the west. Noah had to tread carefully when dealing with these two forces. All these years, James didn't ask for anything. Even when he took the towns of Fushia and Zinar, he didn't expand his lands any further. He conducted himself in a manner that even Noah found it hard to find fault in his actions. James restrained himself and did it well. Because of this, Noah reluctantly agreed to give William a badge that allowed him to form his own order. Such a shame, I was planning to add him to the Knight Order of Gladiolus after he graduated from the academy, Noah lamented. He had already made the necessary arrangements by giving EST the badge of the Knight Order, so that he could pass it to William. It was his way of bringing the next generation of Ainsworths under his wing. Who would have thought that the old fox, James, had seen through his move? Ezio had already reported to James that William had acquired the badge of the Knight Order from EST. This was also why the old man was forcing Noah to allow William to establish his own order. An organization that would be recognized by the Hellan Kingdom. That way, he would have his own private force. What better place to recruit members for that private force than the best academy in the Hellan Kingdom? This was the only part that made Noah's heart itch. He silently cursed James for shamelessly using the talents of the kingdom to raise his grandson's private army. Back in the grand hall of the Solaris dormitory. After the 10 minutes had expired, the majority of the students had come to their senses and left the hall one by one. A soft sigh escaped William's lips and the officers behind him thought that he was sighing in disappointment. What they didn't know was that William was actually sighing in relief. Forming an order was not an easy thing to do. In order to arm his subordinates, he needed gold and other resources. William was currently 14 years old and the Ainsworth family was very poor, or so he thought. He didn't want to ask his grandpa to give him money in order to support his subordinates. The red-headed boy wanted to use his own powers in order to build a strong force whose name would be known throughout the entire southern continent. What he didn't know was that James had a mountain of gold and treasures at his disposal due to the fact that he constantly raided the hideouts of bandits in the Hellan Kingdom. If William knew about this, then he would shamelessly hug his grandpa's thigh and beg for him to give him a few thousand gold coins for his personal use. In the end, out of the more than 300 students inside the Great Hall, only 36 remained. William looked at these young men and women and nodded his head in appreciation. "Thank you for your trust," William said with sincerity. "I will do my best to exceed your expectations. For now, let's sign the contract. Please, form 2 lines." The students obediently complied and formed 2 lines. William then handed a stack of contracts to Priscilla and Kenneth to distribute to those that had remained, and willing to join his organization. Somewhere in the Temple of the 10,000 Gods. "Gavin, your follower is a good person," Sankas, the god of oaths and contracts, patted Gavin's shoulder inside the restaurant. "It's a shame that I didn't see him sooner. He has the potential to become a good scammer. Such a shame, we could have conquered the world together using loans and debts. Ha, quite unfortunate. Truly unfortunate." The corner of Gavin's lips twitched as he forced himself to keep the smile on his face. Deep down inside, he didn't know if Sankas was praising him or not for having a shameless follower like William. Gavin also agreed that Sankas and William would have been a match made in heaven. He could already see the red-headed boy grinning like mad as he laid upon a mountain of gold while being surrounded by beautiful ladies. "That's it. I've decided." Sankas suddenly stood up as he looked at the projection in front of him. William was currently supervising the signing of contracts using the person's blood in order to empower it and allow Sanctus Divinity to bind it in place. "I'm going to give him a gift," Sankas chuckled mischievously. "What kind of gift are you planning to give him?" Issei, who just arrived in the restaurant, overheard the conversation and decided to join Gavin and Sankas. "Ah, Issei, perfect timing," Sankas grinned. "I'm planning to send this as a gift to William using the mail of the god shop. What do you think? Will he like this gift of mine?" Sankas opened a box to show the 2 gods the gift he was planning to give to the red-headed boy. Gavin and Issei almost spat blood at the same time when they saw the contents of the box. "Why, you can't be serious!" Gavin exclaimed. "Oi, think twice. No. Think thrice. Sankas, my friend, I think William wouldn't like this gift." Issei was already sweating buckets. "No. I'll be perfectly honest, he wouldn't like it. He might even curse you and stop believing in your power as the god of contracts." "Is that so?" Sankas heaved a sigh of disappointment. The 2 gods wiped their heads in relief after seeing Sankas' expression. Both of them knew that William would go into a mad fit if the god of contracts sent that horrible thing to him at this point in time. Donger, don't worry, Sankas said as he caressed the wooden box in his hand. I will find you a good owner one of these days. As if to respond to Sankas' words, the box shook a little. It was as if it was agreeing to its master's words. Donger, the great dong that pierced the heavens thousands of years ago, and made all the ladies scream in panic at the sight of it, was currently sealed by the god of contracts. The contract between him and Donger was going to expire in 4 years, and Sankas was looking for a worthy person to take in the poor Donger. Gavin and Issei exchanged a glance at each other and nodded their heads. No matter what happened, they would not allow William to receive Donger from Sankas. If that were to happen, then the world of Hestia would definitely experience a world-shaking calamity. Chapter 189, Speak now or forever hold your tongue. After the contract had been signed, William took everyone that was part of his team inside the conference room that was under the head prefect's management. As the leader of a newly formed organization, there were some important things that he needed to discuss with them. I'm sure that most of you are curious as to why I decided to form an organization within the academy, William said. Unfortunately, I can't tell you the details yet because it is something that concerns the kingdom's security. The expressions of the students suddenly became serious as they listened to William's explanation. All I can tell you is that I intend to create an elite unit that will be able to cope with any kind of situation, regardless of what it is, William explained. Of course, in order to make that happen, each and every member must reach a certain level of proficiency and perfect their teamwork. There's also the problem of the weapons and equipment that you will use whenever we go out on missions. All of this requires money and resources and, to be perfectly honest, I don't have these resources. Spencer coughed lightly when William came out clean. He had already known that the Ainsworths were not that well off when it came to money. Even their main residence in Lont couldn't compare to what they had in their duchy. Sir William, you already know that making an organization requires funding, Priscilla commented. If you don't have the resources, then why make one in the first place? That's because, I am confident that we can make things work out if all of us work together. William grinned. Although he didn't have money and resources right now, there were many ways to get them. As someone that had accompanied Ezio for half a year wandering the Hellan Kingdom, William had seen the darkness and filth of humanity. He planned to use his knowledge in order to gain the funds needed for his private army. First things first, I want all of you to have a mount, William continued his explanation. This way, we can travel anywhere in a moment's notice. What would you guys like to have as a mount? At the very least, the mount should be a Class C beast. The red-headed boy ignored his officers and stared at the regular students in his organization. If you have any recommendations, feel free to tell me. Mount, one of the students' eyes widened in surprise. You're going to give us mounts? For free. The one who spoke was a commoner and he was 18 years old when he passed the entrance exam. He followed William because he felt that he had nothing to lose by becoming his direct subordinate. Never in his dreams did he think that the first thing that his head prefect would ask was what kind of mount they wanted. For free? Yes. William nodded. However, whether you can tame them or not will depend on your ability. William glanced at his officers with a grin. I know that all of you are very capable, and you can secure a mount of your own. However, if you need help in acquiring one, just tell me, maybe I can help. Just take note that the limit is a Class C beast. It can't go higher than that. The students got really excited and started to discuss what kind of beast would be ideal for them. William watched this scene as he sat leisurely in his chair. What he didn't know was that inside the dean's office, Simon, the current dean of the Hellan Academy, was rubbing his temples due to the letter that had just arrived a few minutes ago. Noah had informed Simon that the kingdom was about to recognize a new knight order that would be called the Anglo-Ryan War Sovereign, or AWS for short. He was tasked to prepare for a short ceremony within the academy grounds for this new order to be recognized by the entire student body. Celine, your disciple will be the death of me, Simon sighed as he put the letter aside and looked at the ceiling. Just what in the world is happening? This was the first time that a first-year student would become the head of an organization that would be given the same rank as the Knight Order of the Hellan Kingdom. This was not a simple thing to do because this would basically give William the rank of a general in times of war. Simon couldn't think of a single reason as to why the king would do something like this. If not for the fact that the letter was delivered with the king's official seal, he would have thought that this was just a prank made by the red-headed boy. The dean of the academy rubbed his tired eyes as he stood from his seat. He had to obey the king's wishes and discuss it with the staff. Simon also wanted to have a private talk with William to ask him why something like this was approved. EST hastily left the magic class division along with Ian and Isaac after reading the king's letter. He couldn't believe that the shepherd he knew would do something like this. William had just left Lont for a week, and when he came back, he became the leader of a new knight order. This was something unheard of. The reason why he rushed to the martial class division was to confirm whether this news was true or not. Depending on its credibility, he might need to change his plans when it came to interacting with the boy who seemed to be hell-bent on forming his own private army. Unfortunately, when he arrived at the martial division, he was barred from entering. The guard said that the head prefect had ordered them to not allow anyone aside from the martial division to enter the premises, because he was going to discuss something important with the first-year students. Because of this, EST had no choice but to return empty-handed, and wait for the boy to come and find them after the meeting was done. William sat comfortably on his chair, not knowing that he had alarmed many influential people in the capital. Currently, the students were discussing the kind of mount that they wanted. The commoners were very excited, and it affected the mood of the lesser nobles as well. All of them agreed that the mount should be fast, and must be able to fly as well. This way, it would give them plenty of leeway to travel on both air and land. A creature that can travel on both air and land sounds good. William nodded his head in agreement. The only creature he had encountered that was capable of doing those feats was the winged black panther that attacked him at the outskirts of the Strathmore forest. Although it would be a bit tricky to catch these creatures, it was not impossible. He already had someone that could help him do this in his mind, he just needed to find the opportunity to talk to that creature and make him agree to his request. William subtly listened as the students mentioned beast names like griffins, winged tigers, Pegasus, and many more flying beasts. The red-headed boy almost spat at them for trying to bite off more than they could chew. Griffins and winged tigers were Class B creatures. As for the Pegasus, they were Class A beasts that only allowed a select few to mount them. They were known to attack those who trespassed on their territory and were very aggressive creatures. Fortunately, Priscilla stepped up and woke them up from their daydreams. In the end, she gave one recommendation and William thought that it was a very good choice. We should go with Hippogriff, Priscilla proposed. They are easier to tame and less aggressive than the griffins. Also, they become loyal mounts once you properly train them. They are the mainstay of the kingdom of Frisia's air cavaliers. The students unanimously agreed with Priscilla's proposal and looked at William in anticipation. Very well. William nodded in acknowledgement. Hippogriff it is. However, only those who will be able to complete the regular training will be given the right to have one. You must show me that you are worthy to own a hippogriff. The students cheered in happiness and left the room with big smiles on their faces. Only the officers, Kenneth, Priscilla, Spencer, Drake, Conrad, and Dave, were left with William. The hippogriffs were only for the regular students, but the leaders were different. They had to stand out from the rest in order to lead their subordinates effectively in the roles that they were meant to play. Who among you doesn't have a mount? William inquired. Speak now, or forever hold your tongue. Conrad and Dave raised their hands. Although Conrad was a noble, he was the third son in a family of marquets. He wasn't highly favored in his family, which was why he decided to enroll at the academy in order to grasp his own fate. He didn't amount to much because he was surrounded by very capable individuals, namely Priscilla, Spencer, and Drake. However, even though these teenagers were stronger than him, he was stronger than them in one aspect, and that was socializing. Because of this, he was able to form a circle of friends who had very high potential, just like Dave, who became an officer before him. Dave, on the other hand, was just a commoner that came from the south of the Helan kingdom. After successfully enrolling in the academy, he hoped to be under a nobleman's wing. This way, he would be able to live a better and comfortable life. Aside from these two, none of the other officers raised their hands. It meant that they already had a mount of their own and didn't need William to provide one for them. Chapter 190, James' Old Nemesis. Okay, what kind of beasts do you want to have? William inquired. I will give you a bit more leeway and allow you to choose a beast that is at the initial stages of Class B. Anything higher than that is impossible. Now, tell me what you want. Conrad and Dave exchanged a glance at each other before telling William what kind of mounts they wanted. A devilish grin appeared on William's face before he nodded his head in understanding. A week passed and the students that went to help subjugate the various dungeon outbreaks in the Helan kingdom finally returned to the academy. Naturally, there were casualties among the student bodies, but it was lower compared to what Simon had expected. Even so, each student that passed away was a great loss for the kingdom. The king had given the families of these brave students proper compensation and a monument was built inside the academy to honor their bravery. It took some time for the students to recover from their traumatic experience and all lessons were put on hold for a month to allow the students to recuperate. Simon decided to postpone William's ceremony until everyone in the academy had regained a semblance of normality before shocking them all again with the event that he had planned for Celine's one and only disciple. While things were on hold at the academy, William took this opportunity to take the members of the Anglo-Ryan War Sovereign outside of the academy to conduct their special training, capture mounts, and gather resources. Guark. Dave, the officer in charge of the logistic team, used a tree as a support as he vomited everything that he had eaten for lunch. He could taste the sourness in his mouth as tears streamed from his eyes. A few meters away from him, several students were also puking their hearts out. William and his officers watched them with understanding and allowed them to take a break for the time being. I never thought you were this ambitious, Sir William, Priscilla said in admiration. However, with just this, it won't be enough to cover everyone's equipment. The beautiful girl addressed the young boy who was wearing a hooded traveler's cloak and was standing in the center of the bandits' camp. William gave his vice prefect a sidelong glance before looking at the gold chests beside his feet. Fortunately, this kingdom has plenty of scumbags ripe for the pickings. We won't be running out of bandits to hunt anytime soon, so you don't have to worry about not having enough funds, Vice Prefect. Kenneth didn't expect William to be someone who didn't bat an eye when killing people. He did it in such a natural manner that it made the delicate-looking boy look at him in a different light. Conrad had killed a bandit once in the past due to self-defense. Because of this, he was able to slightly endure the heavy scent of blood in the air. However, he didn't dare to look at the pile of corpses that were lined up on the ground. After killing 2 bandits, he had already reached his limit and didn't force himself to kill more. It was William and Priscilla who mercilessly slaughtered the bandits using their bows and arrows. The funny part about this was that both of them only killed the strong people among the bandit group. They left the weaker ones for the students to deal with in order to give them some life experiences that they would need to survive in the world. Even Spencer, and Drake, had to admit that they didn't expect that their head prefect, who was only 14 years old, could be this merciless. The two of them had already been trained by their families to take human lives, but the scene in front of them still made them feel uncomfortable. Spencer and Conrad, go to the town and tell the guard captain to bring his men to clean up this place, William ordered. Also, remember to collect the commission afterward. Some of these bandits have bounties on their heads. We need every gold coin we can salvage from this lot. Yes, sir. Priscilla and Kenneth were paying extra attention to their observation of William. For some reason, the usual happy-go-lucky atmosphere that their head prefect always radiated was gone. It was now replaced with a boy whose killing intent oozed out of his body. Ella walked towards William and stood beside him. Dia and Ragnar had stayed with Ella when William gave the order to attack the bandit hideout. The Angorian goat didn't hide anywhere, but stood back a safe distance in order to not intervene with William's bandit subjugation. Dia immediately crawled onto William's clothes. After she'd coiled herself around William's neck, she playfully removed the boy's hood and nuzzled his cheeks. She was like a spoiled daughter that was asking for her father's attention. The red-headed boy smiled and lightly rubbed Dia's chin. The killing intent surrounding him disappeared completely, and the usual William who was bright and sunny returned like a refreshing breeze. Thank you, Mama, William said as he picked up Ragnar from the ground. He then rubbed the puppy's head and the latter licked his cheeks in response. Thor was currently staying by Wendy's side, so he didn't bring him along on this trip to the south. Kenneth and the others were dumbfounded by the sudden shift in character. They even felt that the indifferent William that they had seen a few moments ago was just a figment of their imagination. William didn't know what his officers were thinking because he was too busy shielding his face from Ragnar's and Dia's combined assault. The two children peppered the red-headed boy's face with their affection, while Ella watched from the side with gentle eyes. Sir William, what is our next plan of action? Priscilla asked. She was doing her best to keep the smile on her face from twitching because of the sudden change in William's character. Let's wait until Spencer and Conrad return, William replied in a casual manner. He then raised his head to look at the sun and made calculations inside his head. The day is still early, we'll have enough time to raid one more bandit hideout before we have dinner in the next town. Dave and the others who had just finished emptying their stomachs suddenly felt that the world had lost all its colors. Surprisingly, they were not afraid of raiding another bandit camp. What they were afraid of was having dinner, after killing the bandits in the southern regions of the Hellan Kingdom. The way they were now, they would be unable to stomach smelling or eating meat for the next few days. Now they finally understood why their head prefect rarely ate meat when eating in the dining hall. William gave his pitiful subordinates a devilish smile. Unlike the red-headed boy, the people in Hestia were faster to recover when it came to the concept of killing. This was also why they were able to accept the fact that they had just taken a human life without guilt whatsoever. In this world, where the lives of people were like grass, those who refused to fight would sooner or later be cut down. As students who had enrolled in the academy, they were not oblivious to this concept. More than anyone else, they were faster to adapt because their environment required them to fight. Although they were suffering right now, they were still better off compared to William who had experienced going to hell and back. James read Ezio's report with a calm expression. He had ordered him to keep watch on William, Matthew, and Leah in the academy. Since the newlyweds were currently staying in the academy, Ezio deemed that there was no need to look after them and sneakily followed William and his subordinates. Ezio was surprised that the first thing that the boy did after leaving the academy was to hunt down bandits. What surprised him the most was that the boy had meticulously picked targets that they were able to fight. He didn't go towards the notorious bandit camps where strong fighters congregated. Instead, he picked weaker camps that could be taken down with the current forces at his disposal. This action made Ezio recognize that William had grown from the experiences he had encountered in the past 4 years of his training. Ezio had written all of this in the letter he had sent his lord as he continued to monitor William's movements. James knew that aside from gathering resources, William was also training the students how to take human lives in preparation for the war that might happen a few months from now. He figured that his grandson wanted to create an elite unit that wouldn't shy away from taking the lives of others when they headed deeper in the enemy's formation. Even so, he was still worried that his grandson would do something reckless and bite off more than he could chew. Damien, Gideon, come here, James ordered. You called for us, boss. Is it our turn to shine? 2 men standing 2 meters tall with sturdy bodies appeared in front of James with a grin. My grandson is currently clearing out some bandits in the southern part of the Hellan Kingdom, James explained. Make sure the old salamander doesn't make a move on him. That old bastard still holds a grudge against me and he might vent it out on William. Make sure that he doesn't go too far. The south. Gideon tilted his head. You mean that south? The south where that grumpy old lunatic is staying? Damien asked. James smiled and nodded his head. William has wandered into his territory. I want the 2 of you to bail him out if he does something unnecessary. Damien and Gideon glanced at each other. Although they were confident in their strength, the person they were going to deal with was one tough cookie. After all, it was none other than James' nemesis, and the sole sword saint of the Hellan Kingdom, Aramis Bran Caliban. Chapter 191, A Senior Dares to Bully Children? Understood, but how far can we go when we take action? Damien inquired. He is the head of the noble faction in the south. Little Will might get in trouble if we pester him too much. That's right, boss, Gideon commented. That old man is pettier than you, I mean, less handsome and domineering than you. Things might get out of hand if we ruffle his feathers. James snorted. He and the old man from the south had been butting heads since the former king was still in power. They were once best friends, but immediately turned hostile after they had both fallen in love with the same lady. Naturally, the one who married the girl was James, and his once best friend vowed that he would make things difficult for him and his entire bloodline. James wasn't afraid of his threats because he knew that his longtime friend wouldn't really dare to take William's life. Many years had passed since they last saw each other and James hoped that the man's anger had already simmered down. Even so, that didn't mean that the old bastard would miss the opportunity to catch the little Ainsworth who came walking into his territory. I changed my mind, James said with a serious expression. If that old bat makes a move then let him do it. You two are to watch from the shadows and only rescue William if things get out of hand. By your will. The two men disappeared from the room and faint chuckles could be heard in the air. Clearly, the two were going to enjoy the mission that James had given them. It had been a while since they had left Lant and they were itching to cause some trouble at their destination. Maybe this is a good opportunity to teach William a thing or two about the division of power in the kingdom, James thought. Also, I'm very curious. Just what kind of hospitality is he planning to give my grandson? James looked towards the south with a smile. Although he didn't want to admit it, he was very curious to know how the Sword Saint of the Helan Kingdom would deal with his grandson who was currently messing around inside his domain. Drake whistled as he checked the contents of the storage rings that were taken from the bandit leader of the camp that they had just raided. This was the 4th day since their arrival in the southern region and, so far, they had already dispatched 4 bandit groups. If I only knew that raiding bandit camps was this profitable, I might have done it sooner, Drake said as he handed the storage ring to William. Spencer snorted and gave Drake a sneer, you make it sound like raiding bandit camps is easy. I'd like to see you try and do it on your own. How about we make a bet on who will kill the most bandits in the next raid? You're on. The two rivals glared at each other while William waited for the inventory list that Dave had made after checking the treasures that they had found in the bandit camp. The second camp they had raided was bigger than the first and held 100 bandits. The rankings of the bandits were quite low, and their main fighting force consisted of 10 silver ranks and 1 gold rank. The rest were only copper ranks, which allowed the Anglo-Ryan war sovereign to overpower them due to William's and Priscilla's long-range barrage. After killing the main fighting force, the rest was easy. Dave and the others still had pale faces, but they had managed to defeat a bandit each. William and the officers dealt with the survivors and made sure that none escaped. After an hour of checking the inventory, Dave finally gave his report to William. With this, we will be able to buy the necessary equipment for the rest of our members, Sir William, Dave said. Although his expression still looked pale, there was a hint of admiration that could be seen in his features. William nodded his head as he looked towards the south. He had already sent a few of his subordinates to the nearest town, to report to the local soldiers about the subjugation of the bandit camp. They were just waiting for the students to return so they could find a place to rest for the night. Priscilla, who was seated on top of a tree, whistled which signaled that some unknown individuals were approaching their location. William raised his hand and he, along with the members of his night order, dispersed and hid in the trees to wait in ambush. A few minutes later, a griffin, pulling a carriage, landed a few meters away from the bandit camp. The carriage had a luxurious design and the emblem that was painted on its door was that of a red greatsword. William frowned because he was not familiar with the different insignias in the kingdom. However, his officer, Drake, recognized the emblem very well. It was the symbol of the noble that ruled the southern faction, the Sword of Caliban. The coachman respectfully opened the carriage door and bowed his head. A man with grey hair walked out of the carriage. He was wearing a black warrior tunic, and stood straight like a sword. William assumed that the man was close to his grandfather's age due to his grey hair and eyes. This realization made his expression change to a serious one as he ordered the system to change his job class to cavalier. If worst comes to worst, he would use his ultimate trump card in order to help his subordinates escape. Ella stood beside him with a calm expression. The goat knew that the opponent in front of them was very powerful. His very presence was enough to make the members of William's night order have trouble breathing. Get out, the man ordered. Or do you want me to cut down the trees where you hide? William made a hand gesture to his members to keep hiding, while he stepped forward to face the newcomer. Naturally, Ella followed by his side. She couldn't possibly leave William to fight off against this formidable opponent alone. Dia, who had coiled herself on William's neck, was paying close attention to the man's profile, while Ragnar walked beside Ella. The two mythical beasts were aware that they could do nothing against the opponent in front of them, but they had no intention of leaving William's and Ella's side either. William understood what they were thinking, so he allowed the two to accompany him as he faced off against the man in front of them. The man and the boy stood 20 meters away from each other. The man appraised William and the boy did the same. A few minutes passed in silence before the man took the initiative to start the conversation. What's your name? The man asked. My name? I am none other than Spencer Armstrong, William answered with arrogance. The fourth son of the Duke of Armstrong. How about you, what's your name? Spencer, who was hiding behind a tree, cursed William internally for being shameless. Of all the names he could have used, why settle for my name? Spencer fumed. He could have used Drake's instead. The cool-looking boy was very tempted to come out of his hiding place and kick William with all his might. However, his reasoning prevented him from doing so. Although he felt aggrieved because of William's shameless act, he still didn't dare to move from his hiding spot. What a cheeky brat, the man commented. Since when did the Duke of the Armstrong family have a red-haired half-elf as his son? What can I do? I was born a half-elf with red hair. You are as obnoxious as your grandfather. Ezio, who was hiding from the shadows, observed this scene with a calm expression. He had already received James' order through the use of a special means. Because of this, he didn't have any intention of saving William from his predicament. The nobles of the kingdom had strict laws that they followed. Among them was not to intervene with the battles of the young generation. Anyone who would openly break this rule would suffer the combined oppression of all the noble houses. Since Mordred had officially become a marquess, this meant that the rule also applied to all the members of the Ainsworth family. Also, although William's knight order hadn't been publicly revealed, the king had already recognized its legitimacy. No noble would want to mess with the head of a knight order. Of course, there were some people who were exceptions to this rule, and the Sword Saint was one of them. The man then released his killing intent, which made Conrad, Dave, and the others kneel on the ground panting for breath. Kenneth, Priscilla, Spencer, and Drake grit their teeth in an effort to endure the powerful killing intent, but their resistance only lasted for a brief moment, before they too collapsed on the ground due to the overwhelming pressure. Dia hissed, and Ragnar growled. The two mythical beasts were doing their best to resist as well, but their bestial instincts were telling them that the man in front of them was the personification of death. William tapped the ground in front of him with his staff, and the pressure raining down on him was dispersed. He had a carefree smile on his face as he looked at the man in front of him. A senior dares to bully children. William sneered. Such an honorable thing to do. The killing intent that the man was releasing might be strong, but who was William? He was someone who had endured the worst torture under Selene and faced killing intent training from Ezio. The man's act might fool others, but it was not enough to fool him. He already knew that whoever the person in front of him might be, he was only there to intimidate them. If he really wanted to attack them, he would not bother with words and simply do the deed without much fuss. Chapter 192, I will not allow others to use me as a stepping stone. A senior dares to bully children. William sneered. Such an honorable thing to do. The man ignored William's taunt and simply uttered an order. Cid, come. Yes. Master. A handsome young boy who seemed to be around 16 years old, with short platinum blonde hair, emerged from the carriage. Behind him, a lady who seemed to be of the same age followed suit. She also had platinum blonde hair, which made William assume that the two of them were siblings. The young teenager bowed to the man as he waited for his master's order. Defeat him, the man ordered. If you manage to do that, I will give you a reward. This disciple will obey your order, master, Cid replied and faced William with a serious expression. He unsheathed his sword from its sheath and held it firmly on one hand. My name is Cid El Caliban, Cid announced. As per my master's order, I will defeat you. I'm your daddy, and I'm here to spank you because of your stupidity, William replied as he lightly tapped Dia's head. Dia, go with your grandma Ella for now. You, too, Ragnar. Mama, I'll leave the kids in your care. Me. The serpent and the puppy reluctantly left William's side and went with Ella as she left the battlefield. William closed his eyes and breathed deeply. He could tell that the young boy who was about to fight him was strong. In fact, he was the strongest boy that William was about to face in his life. Kingsley couldn't even compare to the boy's presence, and William knew that he had to fight seriously if he hoped to win against his opponent. This might be one of the true prodigies of the Hellan Kingdom. William opened his eyes and focused on his opponent. I've always wanted to try fighting one of those elven prodigies that Master was so proud about. I'm guessing this man's level is similar to theirs. William twirled the staff in his hand once before taking the stance of the relentless dragon war art. System, change my subclass to spearman. Changing subclass has been successful. While William was preparing for the fight, Cid looked at him in contempt. I announced my name in order to declare my intention of fighting you seriously, Cid said. Aren't you going to do the same? Sure. I'll tell you my name, William said as he firmly gripped the wooden staff in his hand. After you beat me, that is. Arrogant. The word is handsome. Get your facts straight, fool. As if waiting for that cue, both boys charged at each other. William thrust his wooden staff forward, while his opponent nimbly deflected it. The swordsman was about to go for a body strike, but the other end of William's staff struck towards his side, which forced him to take a step back. The red-headed boy didn't miss the opportunity and took a step forward to deliver a barrage of short and long thrusts at the slippery boy, who dodged his attacks with practiced movements. After dodging a few times, the young swordsman regained his footing and delivered a combination of sword strikes that forced William to a defensive position. However, thanks to his parry skill, the critical strikes were deflected, which allowed him to counter-attack a few times. Kenneth and the others watched this exchange with serious expressions. They had never seen William fight seriously before, aside from the time he fought against Priscilla. Kenneth watched his roommate's movements with discerning eyes. He was gauging William's combat level through this battle in order to better understand how strong he was. It had only been 2 minutes since the two boys clashed, but their exchange had already surpassed 100 strikes each. This proved how intense their battle was. However, experts could tell with a glance that the one who had a disadvantage in this battle was William. The two fighters separated and locked eyes with each other. You're not half bad, Cid said with a composed smile. You're very bad, William commented. The grandma in my hometown who does the laundry is stronger than you. The smile on Sid's face disappeared as he glared at the boy who dared to mock him. What he didn't know was that William was not mocking him, but praising him. The grandma the red-headed boy was referring to was one of the hidden experts of Lant. It was only natural that Cid was weaker compared to her. I will now get serious, Cid stated as he changed his fighting stance. Playtime is over. Go ahead. I don't plan on getting serious anytime soon, William replied. You are too weak. Cid narrowed his eyes as he took a step forward. The sword in his hand glowed bloody red as he infused it with his sword aura. Rend my foes, Lazarus. Cid roared as he slashed the space in front of him twice. William couldn't see anything, but he could tell that two powerful attacks were headed in his direction. The red-headed boy was about to dodge, but he suddenly realized that Dave was hiding at the tree behind him. If he dodged now, the attack would hit Dave and it might give the chubby boy serious injury. It can't be helped, William thought as he channeled his aura in his wooden staff. Lightning God War Art, 12th form, Gungnir. William threw his wooden staff towards Cid. However, instead of flying towards the swordsman, the staff swerved mid-flight and collided with something invisible. Two loud claps reverberated in the air as the wooden staff returned to William's hand. The man observing the battle raised an eyebrow. He was a sword saint and he saw how William imbued the spear with his aura. However, what he didn't understand was how the staff was able to neutralize Cid's attack. Even Cid, who had executed one of the secret arts of his master's sword technique, was surprised by the outcome. Even a steel sword would be cut in half if it faced his attack head-on. However, what truly shocked him was the fact that his attack was blocked by a wooden staff, and it wasn't even damaged. Unfortunately, William wasn't planning to give him time to recover from the shock. The shepherd used his movement technique to close the gap and delivered a powerful thrust. Cid nimbly dodged to the side to evade the attack. However, for some unknown reason, the end of the staff still hit him squarely on his chest, sending him flying a few meters away. He's wearing some kind of armor underneath his clothes. William clicked his tongue as he prepared for another strike. He was still currently using the Lightning God War Art and Gungnir's specialty was its ability to always hit its target. Each of the moves under the Lightning God War Art lasted for a minute. William wouldn't be able to use the same move again because it had a cooldown of 24 hours. The only saving grace was that William could still use the other forms in his repertoire like the Killing Blow Gi-Balg and the Piercing Strike Longinus. For this 1 minute, all of William's attacks would never miss as long as he was holding a staff, spear, or polearm weapon. Cid immediately fell on the defensive as he did his best to block all of William's thrusts. After trying to dodge a few times and getting hit a few times as well, the swordsman felt that something was wrong. However, no matter how hard he thought, he couldn't come up with a solution and decided to just go on the defensive for the time being. Enough! Cid shouted as he unleashed his sword aura to its limit. He was getting annoyed that the red-headed boy was able to get the upper hand in their exchange. With a single slash, he managed to push William 20 meters away from where he stood. The red-headed boy was unharmed and simply used the momentum of the blow to skid on the ground. Cid looked at his opponent and removed the bracelet on his wrists. He was no longer treating this fight as a game. He couldn't afford to lose face in front of his master and his older sister. William smirked as he watched the scene. This battle will end in the next clash. He already knew that Cid was strong, but he noticed a very crucial flaw as he exchanged blows with his opponent. This old fox. He is only using me as a stepping stone to hone his disciple, William sneered internally. Since that is the case, I will play along. I also don't want to waste my time on this farce. William unsummoned his staff and took a barehanded stance. The red-headed boy's presence changed as the air around his body seemed to fluctuate. Changing subclass to monk successful. A brief flash of admiration appeared in the sword saint's eyes as he looked at the grandson of the man he hated the most in the southern continent. Yes. Aramis already knew of William's true identity. How could he possibly not? The boy had been in his territory for 4 days and the saint had been paying close attention to his movements ever since he subjugated the first bandit group in his domain. He wanted to see just what kind of child William was, so he decided to bring his disciple to have a duel with his nemesis grandson. Since he couldn't bring himself to lower his dignity to fight a kid, he ordered his disciple to beat him in his place. Amaris didn't expect that William was strong enough to push his disciple to become serious. However, he already knew who the victor of this duel would be after the first clash. This will be a good lesson for you, Amaris thought as he waited for the final exchange between the two prodigies of the young generation. This is the difference between someone who knows how to fight, and someone who is fighting with his life on the line. The sword saint closed his eyes. As expected of your grandchild, Urza. Exceed break, William muttered as he bent his wrist in order to execute the strongest attack in the monk skill tree, the overwhelming strike. After removing the bracelets on his wrists, Cid's speed and power grew threefold. William on the other hand stood his ground and initiated the crane stance. It was an attack that William could only use once a day, and it was the strongest attack amongst all of his job classes. Two shouts pierced the air as William and Cid exchanged the final blow that would end their battle. William activated the exceed break in order to raise his sensitivity 100-fold. This meant that every little thing that was within 100 meters around him would be perceived by his senses. And then, it happened. A loud clap, accompanied by the sound of something breaking reverberated in the surroundings. Cid's body slammed against a tree 100 meters away before falling on the ground with a dull thud. Blood dyed the ground red as blood flowed from William's left arm and broken right hand. Even so, that didn't stop the boy from raising his right hand in the air to announce his victory. I do not wish for dominion, but I will not allow others to use me as a stepping stone, William announced as his body fell backwards due to his injuries. William didn't want to lose again. He'd had enough of losing. That's why, he didn't back down even though the odds were against him. He utilized everything in his arsenal to show the sword saint that he wasn't a stepping stone that his disciple could trot over. Instead, he would be the mountain that Cid, and the other so-called geniuses in the southern continent, had to overcome. He would be the peak that they would never hope to reach during their entire lifetimes. Chapter 193, The Sword Saint's Condition. William felt something wet licking the side of his cheek. When he opened his eyes, he saw Ragnar slathering his cheeks with his slobber. The little puppy was so focused on his action, that he didn't notice that William had finally woken up. The red-headed boy didn't move right away. Instead, he checked his current condition. His left arm had been stabbed by a sword during the battle, but he could tell that it was now properly healed. The same could be said of his broken hand, which he used to send Cid flying. Due to the unknown armor the boy was wearing, William's fist, which was already as hard as diamonds due to his monk skill, still received damage from the blow. Fortunately, he had covered it with his aura. If he didn't, then the damage would have been more severe. Seeing that both of his injuries were healed, the red-headed boy finally breathed a sigh of relief. He then noticed a blinking light on his status page that meant that some notifications had appeared during his sleep. Out of curiosity, William opened it to see what it was. Ding! Hidden quest has been cleared. Defeat the disciple of the Sword Saint. Reward, 1000 God points. Nice, William thought as he read the unexpected reward he received from the system. Having more God points is always a good thing. William then grabbed the cute puppy with both hands and raised him up in the air. You naughty boy, how dare you cover your papa with saliva? William asked as he playfully tickled the puppy's chest. He had already noticed that he was in an unfamiliar room the moment he woke up, but since he wasn't chained or anything, it meant that he and his subordinates were safe for the time being. Ragnar whined and howled pitifully as he wiggled his legs to escape from William's hold. While the two were having their family bonding time, the door opened. Kenneth, along with Priscilla, entered the room. Sir, it's good to see that you are awake, Priscilla said as she walked towards William's bed. Where are we? William inquired while still playing with Ragnar. We are currently inside the residence of the Duke of Caliban, Kenneth replied. Everyone is, also, here. You don't need to worry because we are being treated as guests. William hummed as he placed Ragnar on his stomach. He then patted the puppy's head to make it behave while he summoned a handkerchief to wipe his cheek free from puppy slobber. How long was I unconscious? William asked. It is currently 8 in the morning, Priscilla answered. You fought off the saint's disciple yesterday. I see. William continued to lie on the bed because it was very soft and comfortable. They had been camping outside for the past few days, and he had briefly forgotten what it was like to sleep on a luxurious bed. You said I fought off the Sword Saint's disciple, so the man standing back then was the Sword Saint? William inquired. Yes, Priscilla answered. A short period of silence permeated the room before William looked at Kenneth and Priscilla with a serious expression. Are we in trouble? I mean, I did beat the crap out of his disciple yesterday. Don't worry. Like I said, we are being treated as guests. We are not confined or anything and were given freedom to wander around his estate. Kenneth sat beside the bed and stared at William with his clear blue eyes. Will, you are stronger than I thought. William grinned. Right? Are you now happy that you followed the right person? Kenneth smirked, but didn't answer William's question. He was quite satisfied that the Sword Saint had ordered his best clerics to heal William's injuries. The silver-gray-haired boy had heard rumors that Aramis was a cold and vicious killer. However, so far, he didn't see any evidence that their current host was the same person he'd heard about in the rumors. William was about to ask another question when a knock was heard on the door. The three people inside the room exchanged a glance before Priscilla volunteered to open the door to see who it was. A young lady with platinum blonde hair entered the room while glaring at William. The master is calling for you, the blonde girl said. Come with me. From her tone, one could tell that it wasn't a request, but an order. William lifted Ragnar off his chest as he propped himself up off the bed. He then gently placed the puppy on the floor before facing the girl that was looking at him with restrained anger. Please give me a minute, I'll just change my clothes to make myself look more presentable, William replied. He didn't wait for the girl's reply and started to strip his upper clothes. The girl snorted and left the room, along with Kenneth and Priscilla. William picked a set of noble clothes that his Aunt Helen had prepared for him before he left Lant. Since his family was a noble household, he must act like one in order to not give people a bad impression. Exactly a minute later, William left the room and was escorted alone by the girl who seemed keen on taking a bite of his body. After a series of twists and turns, the two arrived in front of an ornate golden door. With a glance, William could tell that this was an important room within the Duke's household. Master, we have arrived, the girl announced in a respectful tone. Enter, a cold and firm voice answered from within the room. The door swung open, allowing the two children to enter unimpeded. Allow me to introduce myself, the man said while sitting on a red throne carved with runic symbols. I am Aramis Bran Caliban, and the person I hate the most in this world is your grandfather, James von Ainsworth. William was prepared to introduce himself but stopped short after hearing Aramis' introduction. Seeing his awkward expression, Aramis merely gestured for him to take a seat. The red-headed boy nodded his head and sat down while staring at the person who had a grudge on his grandpa, James. Tell me, what are you doing in my domain? Aramis questioned. If you tell me that you only came here to subjugate bandits, I will not believe it. We didn't just come here to subjugate bandits, we also came here to take their treasures, William answered. He deemed that, since the other party already had a grudge on his grandpa, whatever he said, or did, wouldn't change his situation. So, instead of cowering in fear or acting servile, he decided to just face the Sword Saint fearlessly and pray that his grandpa would come to save him if he ever got bullied. Is that all? Aramis inquired. You just came here to subjugate bandits, take their treasures, and leave? Is that it? Actually, we also came here because, within the Hellan Kingdom, the southern regions are the home of hippogriffs, William replied. Me and my subordinates are planning to take a few before going back to the Hellan Royal Academy. Hippogriffs? You came all this way to tame hippogriffs? Yes. Why? Aramis frowned. I didn't receive any notice from the academy that their students would be entering my domain to tame hippogriffs. William decided to come clean and tell the Sword Saint the truth. As a master of his rank, Aramis could easily tell the truth from lies. That's because I didn't notify the academy of our actions, William replied. The excuse I gave the dean was that we would only do survival training for a month until the classes resumed. Aramis pondered for a while as he digested William's words. As one of the top officials of the kingdom, he had already been informed that the boy in front of him was the current captain of the new knight order called the Anglo-Ryan War Sovereign. Just as the name suggested, it was an order that was being formed in preparation for the possible war between the four powers of the southern continent. The Helan Kingdom in the west, the Anisha dynasty in the north, Zealand dynasty in the south, and the Kingdom of Frisia in the far east. These were the four powers that made up the entirety of the southern continent. Unfortunately, two of those major powers, the Anisha and Zealand dynasties, were planning to invade them. Aramis had already contacted his spies within the two dynasties to investigate their movements and possible routes for their invasion. As the Sword Saint of the Helan Kingdom, he was the strongest deterrent against such an invasion. For the two rulers to initiate this move only meant one thing. They found strong backing. The Sword Saint had a few hypotheses, and one of them was the interference of the Elven Council of the Silver Moon continent. Aramis was very suspicious of the elves because they had tried to subtly expand their influence on the human territories on both the central and the southern continent. This movement started after they regained the blessings of their world tree. Aside from that first theory, there was another theory, and this one held more credibility than the first. An unknown organization was trying to throw the southern continent into chaos while waiting to reap the benefits. Thanks to James' letter, the king had been informed of an organization that was linked to the dungeon outbreaks that had recently happened within the Helan Kingdom. Although they had no evidence that the same group was behind the beast tide, they had a nagging feeling that they were connected. Also, the timing of the possible invasion after the military might of the Helan Kingdom was exhausted, was too good to be true. It was as if they were mere puppets that were being controlled to perform a play for entertainment. Although Aramis hated James, he could still set aside their differences when facing a threat from outside their borders. Fine, I permit you to tame hippogriffs in my domain. But, there is a condition, Aramis said in an aloof manner. What is your condition, Your Excellency? William asked. You are going to take my disciple Cid, and his sister, Aerith, with you, Aramis replied. This is non-negotiable. Either you take them with you or you can scram from my domain. Aramis had a feeling that his two disciples could learn a thing or two if they stayed by William's side for a short period of time. He had raised them as warriors in a greenhouse and they lacked real battle experience. Seeing how William faced his disciple who was stronger than him, Aramis remembered his first love, Urza, as she fearlessly charged into the battlefield, despite the fact that she was up against foes who were stronger than her. Aramis hoped that some of that bravery would rub off onto his disciples as they journeyed with the red-headed boy, who reminded him strongly of the woman whom he had wished to become his bride many years ago. Chapter 194, Big Game Hunters. Very well. I agree to this condition. William nodded his head. However, I also have a condition. Oh. Aramis raised an eyebrow. This was the first time someone had given a counter-offer to his demands. He glanced at the boy's hair color and once again remembered the first love of his life. After taking control of his thoughts, he made a gesture for William to speak. If your two disciples get in my way, I will kick them out of our group, William stated. This is also non-negotiable. The corner of Aramis' lips raised slightly, so that it was almost unnoticeable to those who didn't know his character. Aerith didn't notice these changes because she was busy glaring at William from beside her master. How dare you demand a condition from our master? Aerith reprimanded. Don't you know who he is? I know who he is, William answered with a refreshing smile. But, do you know who I am? Just a country bumpkin that could be found anywhere. Aerith snorted. You think you are in a position to negotiate with my master? If not for his order, I would not even bother to come with your smelly group. Well, you don't need to join us if you don't want to. William shrugged and returned his attention to the Sword Saint seated on the red throne. This is what I'm talking about, Your Excellency. I'm afraid that your disciples will only create a ruckus along the way, hindering us from completing our mission. Aramis lightly tapped his armchair, which immediately made Aerith hold back the words that she was planning to say. The blonde girl hatefully glared at William, while the latter completely ignored her. Very well. I agree to your condition, Aramis stated. Aerith, you'd better not get in their way. This is part of your training. Do I make myself clear? The blonde girl clenched her fists and reluctantly nodded her head. Although she didn't really want to go with William's group, her master's order was absolute. Aramis then waved his hand and told William to leave. He still had things he needed to do, and seeing William only made his heart ache because he constantly reminded him of his beloved Urza. A day after William's meeting with the Sword Saint, a group of carriages traveled to the southern tip of the Helan Kingdom where a vast expanse of forest could be seen. The citizens of the southern region called this forest the Whimsical Forest. It was a place where the majority of beasts in the southern region could be found. Some of the creatures were rare and some were very rare. This was also why William chose to go south instead of going west. The forbidden land of the west was the Strathmore Forest, and it was not the ideal place to stay and look for hippogriffs. William had asked for a local guide to accompany them to the forest. Fortunately, one of the coachmen working for the Duke used to be an adventurer and had traveled to the Whimsical Forest countless times in the past. Their travel had been smooth and the Duke generously allowed them to take 7 carriages and 2 wagons for their journey. These carriages were pulled by horses, instead of griffins, but William was fine with the arrangement. After 5 days of travel, they finally arrived at their destination. We will set up camp here outside the forest, their guide, a middle-aged man that went by the name Henry, said with a smile. Unless you kids want to become beast chow, then go ahead and set your camp inside. However, I will be staying here. We will follow your advice, Mr. Henry, William replied. Good. I have explored the forest many times in the past and I've witnessed Wendigos raid camps during the night. Not a fun experience, and I don't recommend it. Wendigos? Spencer asked with a curious expression. This forest has Wendigos. Yep. Henry answered. Less than 100, but that was years ago. Perhaps their numbers have increased since my last visit. William had only heard about Wendigos from the bestiary lessons inside the Helan Royal Academy. They were Class C creatures that reeked of death and decay. They liked to feast on human flesh and, on some occasions, possess humans and control their bodies to kill and eat their loved ones. After finishing the dark deed of eating their family members, that person would then transform into a Wendigo, thus multiplying the numbers of these abominations. After hearing the story about the Wendigo, some of the members of William's Night Order felt their stomachs churn in disgust. The image of them cannibalizing their loved ones made them feel very uncomfortable. Don't worry, they don't attack large groups of people. Henry assured them. At most, they will challenge a party of 5, but no higher than that. They might be strong, but they're not stupid creatures. William looked at the forest for a full minute before relaying his orders. We will set up camp here today and hunt for hippogriffs tomorrow. We will also set up a night watch and rotate in groups of 6. The current number of members of William's Night Order allowed his 6 officers to have 6 members under their command. These made the chain of command easier, and allowed William to just sit back and let the others do their duties without needing to bother him. His role was to simply lead them, while his captains managed the other duties. The next day, Henry guided them to a meadow within the forest where the hippogriffs used to stay during his years of adventuring. Hippogriffs, by nature, were omnivores. They ate grass and meat, depending on which was more abundant. The group had just arrived at the meadow when an ear-piercing screech caught their attention. 4 towering beasts arrived at the meadow and began to attack the hippogriffs that were grazing peacefully in the grasslands. A griffin hunting party, Henry's face immediately became serious. They are hunting hippogriffs. Griffins and hippogriffs may look the same, but there were distinct differences between the two. Griffins were magical beasts that had the head and wings of an eagle and the body of a lion. They were also 3 times bigger than hippogriffs, which made them the stronger between the two. Hippogriffs were also magical beasts that had the front legs, wings, and head of an eagle and the body, hind legs and tail of a horse. The two groups fought each other with several hippogriffs fighting against a single griffin. The one leading the defense was a hippogriff that was twice as large as an ordinary one and had a golden luster on its beak, talons, and wings. It was easy to tell that he was the alpha of the herd. The alpha led his subordinates to defend their territory, and a great battle was waged in the skies. Loud shrieks shattered the peace of the meadow as blood rained down from the sky. One of the griffins successfully tore off the wing of one of the defending hippogriffs and the latter fell towards the ground. The girls within the group covered their eyes because they didn't dare look at the outcome of the magical beast who was falling to its death. However, those who were watching the battle had shocked expressions on their faces when they saw William, along with Ella, charge to where the hippogriff was falling. Come forth. Psaglov! William roared. A portal appeared behind the boy and a demonic beast that had a humanoid body with horse legs, and a dog's head appeared with a roar. Don't forget your promise, shepherd. Psaglov said as he summoned his doppelganger. The 2 demonic dogs summoned a pair of spectral hands, and simultaneously used dark whips to create a net to catch the falling hippogriff. Yes, you can have one of those griffins as food, William replied in a calm manner. He had made a deal with the demonic dog before they left the academy because William didn't have any magic power. In order to capture Class C beasts, he needed the help of a stronger beast which left him with few other options. Just like he had done with Spire, William did an equal contract with Psaglov along with several conditions attached. Basically, the demonic dog agreed to help William capture the hippogriffs in return for beast cores and high-grade meat from magical beasts. Aside from helping William capture beasts, he wouldn't do anything else. The hippogriff was safely caught by the dark net and William immediately used the power of his shepherd job class to tame it. There was no taming skill within the job class, but William was able to communicate with herd-type creatures, and invite them to join his herd. The magical beast was seriously injured and its wings were torn off. Although it was hurting, it was still thinking properly. Even so, it didn't resist William's invitation to join his herd because it felt that this was its only path to survival. After successfully adding the hippogriff to his ranks, he immediately sprinkled a high-grade potion on its injuries. He then let it drink another potion in order to help with its recovery. William didn't care if the beast he tamed was currently wingless. What mattered to him was that it was currently part of his herd and under his protection. Psaglov and its doppelganger were still creating dark whips to serve as nets to catch more hippogriffs falling from the sky. Although they had the advantage of numbers, they were Class C creatures at most. Griffins were Class B creatures and one of their natural predators. Only the golden-winged hippogriff was able to face off against them because it was also a Class B creature. As more injured hippogriffs fell from the sky, William's herd grew by the minute. Ella was paying close attention to the battle as well. 2 of the griffins suffered moderate injuries due to the hippogriffs' teamwork. The alpha of the hippogriff group fought off against one of the griffins alone, while the rest dealt with the others. After adding 15 more hippogriffs to his herd, William thought that it was already enough and joined the battle. Several whistling sounds pierced the air as William shot arrows at one of the injured griffins. He made sure to time his shots in order to not hurt any of the hippogriffs that were fighting their mortal enemies with their beaks and talons. The griffins shrieked in anger when they noticed that an insect was getting in the way of their hunt. The one he was shooting at flapped its mighty wings and shrugged off the hippogriffs that were ganging up on it. Psaglov! William shouted as he knocked the adamantium arrow on his bow. He aimed at the approaching griffin and waited for the perfect timing. The griffin dove down to swat the annoying insect, but 4 dark whips grabbed its legs mid-flight. Now! Psaglov roared. Make sure to hit it, boy. This griffin is going to be my lunch. Instead of answering, William released the string and the arrow flew straight and true. It pierced through the griffin's chest, giving it a serious injury. The mighty creature shrieked in pain before crashing towards the ground, creating a dust cloud. Psaglov hurriedly ran towards the dying griffin and formed a bastard sword made of dark energy. As one of the rulers of the forest, it was an opportunistic beast that would use everything to its advantage. It wouldn't allow the griffin to regain its footing and fly away from its grasp. Psaglov stabbed the sword into the back of the griffin's head, ending its life in the process. He made sure to hit its weak spot, so that its dark blade would penetrate without any form of resistance. A shriek resounded in the sky as another griffin dove down. It locked its eyes on Psaglov with the intention to kill. The demonic dog only sneered. It was about to attack the griffin when he received a telepathic message from William. Boy, your appetite is big, Psaglov commented. I like it. William had promised Conrad and Dave that he would hunt for a special mount for them. Dave wanted to have a griffin mount, and it just so happened that there were 3 live griffins around. With such a powerful beast like Psaglov to assist them, William was not afraid of capturing one. What he was afraid of was that there weren't enough griffins to serve as their mounts. Chapter 195, William's demonic business partner. Cid and Aerith, who were ordered to accompany William, both had serious expressions on their faces. They had watched how William had killed a griffin with the help of the demonic beast that resembled a humanoid dog creature. Kenneth, Priscilla, and the others were shocked at the sudden development, but hurriedly went to assist William in fighting off against the remaining griffins. Priscilla, you can injure them but don't give them any lethal injuries, William ordered. We're going to capture these griffins. Priscilla wanted to ask a lot of questions, but she still resolutely followed William's orders. Since she was the only other proficient archer within their group, she immediately fired a few arrows in the air in order to injure the enraged griffin that was sweeping down on them. Psaglov's and the griffin's ranks might be similar, but there was one major difference between the two of them. Although the griffin's physical strength was stronger than the demonic dog, Psaglov was smarter than it. As a monster who loved to eat humans, Psaglov was an expert in the strategy of how to corner his prey and go for the kill. Although he couldn't win in a direct confrontation, he could always use the hit-and-run tactics. Void Arrow. Psaglov, his doppelganger, and the 2 pairs of spectral hands shot the griffin who had dove down from the air. Being a magical creature, its resistance against spells was also high. However, dark magic was different from the elemental classes. It didn't focus on elemental damage, but curses instead. Wisp of black smoke oozed out of the griffin's eyes as it roared in fury. It swiped its claws blindly in an attempt to kill the bastardly dog that had killed its comrade. William, who was watching from the side, was busy dipping his arrows in a cylinder that was filled with the venom of the amphisbaena. Since he wanted to capture the magical beast, neutralizing its resistance was his top priority. After coating 10 arrows with the amphisbaena's venom, the shepherd took aim and shot the rampaging griffin in the air. After the 10th arrow embedded itself on the body of the griffin, its movements started to become dull. Psaglov chuckled as it used its dark whips to forcefully bring the magical beast to the ground. After securely tying the griffin with its dark whip, it eyed the remaining 2 griffins in the air. Seeing that 2 of their comrades had been killed and captured, the 2 remaining beasts decided to retreat. The hippogriffs screeched triumphantly to announce their victories before shifting their attention to William and his group. Priscilla was about to knock another arrow in her bow when William ordered her to stop. Don't do anything that will provoke them, William ordered. Everyone, stay still. Originally, there were 30 hippogriffs who tried to fight the 4 griffins in order to protect their territory. However, 16 of them had fallen in battle. Although they were seriously injured during the battle, none of them died because they were saved by William and Psaglov. The alpha of the hippogriffs landed a few meters away from William and screeched in anger. That's right. William nodded. I came here to capture some of your kind. The alpha screeched once again and spread its golden wings in an attempt to intimidate William. So, do you want them back? William inquired. I don't particularly mind, but can you take care of them? The alpha briefly glanced at its comrades that had lost their wings and limbs during the battle against the griffins. As the leader of the herd, although it sympathized with its comrades, it had no use for individuals that lost their value. Such was life in the whimsical forest. Although the alpha might be too harsh on its own kin, this was a rule that everyone in the jungle abided by. The alpha was silent for a few seconds before glaring at William. You can have them, the alpha said through telepathy. Now get out of my sight. I will not allow you to decrease our numbers any further. There are other groups within this forest. Go capture their members if you dare, but if you touch one more member of my herd, I will fight you to the death. The alpha gave a mighty screech before flapping its wings to fly to the air. The rest of the hippogriffs gave their ex-comrades a sidelong glance before following their leader. The abandoned hippogriffs hung their heads in sadness, but this was a natural occurrence within the forest. If not for William adding them to his herd, they would have just been waiting for their deaths because their alpha had abandoned them. Psaglov wasn't paying attention to William's discussion with the hippogriff because it was busy digging through the griffin's body to find its beast core. The beast cores were usually located at the head of magical beasts. If it's not there then it would be found close to its heart. As a demonic beast, Psoglov had already determined the beast core's location and focused his attention in that area. After digging through the griffin's chest with its claws, it found the core that it was looking for. Psoglov dug out a light purple crystal the size of a bowling ball. It chuckled evilly for a while before opening its mouth to chomp on it. The crystal emitted crispy, crackling sounds that were similar to the sounds of potato chips being consumed. The demonic dog chewed on the core with a satisfied expression, which made Cid and Aerith stare at it with caution. After finishing its meal, Psoglov looked at the body of the griffin and salivated. It couldn't possibly eat it right here, because there was a chance that stronger creatures would come and disturb him. He was now faced with a dilemma and wondering how to best solve this problem. Here, take this, William said as he tossed a storage ring to the demonic dog. We're going back to the camp for the time being. How about you? Psoglov caught the storage ring and gave William a grin. It had heard about these artifacts before, but never had the opportunity to use them. I'll return to my own forest, Psoglov replied as he stored the dead griffin inside the storage ring. Just call me when you are planning to catch your mounts. As long as you keep your promise, we can continue our business transaction. William nodded his head. Just as Psoglov said, their cooperation was just a business transaction. As long as he supplied Psoglov the cores he wanted, the demonic beast would help him capture mounts for his night order. The red-headed boy was able to summon Psoglov because they made an equal contract. This allowed the demonic dog to become a temporary member of William's herd, just like Spire. With the help of the king's divinity that was inside his soul, he would be able to summon them to wherever he was. This ability was called King's Legion. Right now, William was only able to use a quarter of the king's chess piece's divinity because he still hadn't met the requirements to activate it fully. Even so, it was still quite helpful because he could summon the members of his herd, anytime, anywhere. A portal appeared in front of Psoglov, and the latter entered it while giving William a grin. William's group watched all of this with dumbfounded expressions. Just who are you? Aerith asked. How are you able to command an intelligent demonic beast? Just a shepherd, William replied before facing the hippogriffs who were still feeling down. Moping around will not change anything. Since you are now under my her protection, I will do my best to heal your injuries and allow all of you to fly in the skies once again. When the hippogriffs heard that they could once again fly in the sky, all of them looked at William with hope. The latter nodded his head in acknowledgement. I will keep my promise. For now, all of you will be part of my organization. Do you all understand? William inquired. All the hippogriffs made screeches of acknowledgement as they stood. Those who had lost their limbs, remained lying on the ground, but their gazes were burning with life and determination. William smiled before looking at the paralyzed griffin that was lying a few meters away from them. The only creatures that he could tame were herd-type creatures, and the griffin was not one of them. While he was deep in thought, he heard two chuckles not far from their location. Young master, William. Do you plan to have this griffin as your mount? A sturdy man that had a smug expression plastered on his face asked, as he swaggered towards the fallen griffin. Don't worry, we came here because your grandpa was worried about you. Another man who was slightly shorter than the sturdy man appeared without warning. Ezio, come out and tell the young master that we are commander's subordinates. No reply came from the forest, but William scratched his head in understanding. Ezio had told him using very special means that the two men that appeared in front of him were indeed his grandpa's subordinates and could be trusted. May I know both of your names, respected gentlemen? William asked. Respected gentlemen, the sturdy man asked. Gideon, is the young master talking about us? Of course, Gideon answered. Damien, I think you are forgetting something. Only respectable gentlemen can follow commander around. Damien suddenly had the now that I think about it, you're right expression and grinned at William. Indeed, both of us are respectable gentlemen, Damien stated. My name is Damien, and this is my partner, Gideon. How do you do, young master? Gideon replied with a smile. William smiled back as he appraised the two newcomers. Because of his training, he could roughly gauge their strength based on their body language. Ezio had taught him how to read people while he accompanied him on his missions. I want this griffin to become the mount of my officer, William said. Can you help me? Of course, Damien replied. This is a very easy thing to do for a beastmaster like me. Now, who is the lucky guy who is going to have a griffin as his mount? Damien scanned the group of kids that were accompanying his young master. He briefly glanced at the disciples of the Sword Saint before returning his gaze to William. Dave, step forward, William ordered. Sir. Dave stepped forward. Excitement was written all over his face. As a commoner, he had seen griffins pull the carriage of the nobles and had dreamed of owning one in the past. Now that his dream was about to become a reality, he wasn't able to stop himself from praising William to the high heavens. Looks like I chose the right person to follow, Dave thought as he looked at the red-headed boy who had become his idol. I'm going to hug his thigh and never let go. Perhaps, I will be able to soar to greater heights if I stay by his side. His thoughts were shared by the rest of the members of the Anglo-Ryan War Sovereign. All of them were looking at William as if he was a genie that was about to make all of their wishes come true. Chapter 196, The Crusader of the Sky. All right, now put a drop of your blood on his head, Damien ordered. The griffin was paralyzed and couldn't move, but its eyes glared at Dave who was attempting to tame it. Since he didn't have an ounce of magical power, it was quite impossible for him to form a contract with a beast on its own. Fortunately, Damien was a competent beastmaster and acted as a bridge to make the griffin submit to Dave. The boy poked his fingertip with a dagger until blood flowed from it. He then smeared it on the forehead of the griffin while Damien worked the contractual magic to bind the griffin under Dave's control. Now it's a battle, Damien said. You need to make him approve of you through a battle of wills. Griffins are prideful creatures and don't like to become someone's mount. Even those that pull the carriages of nobles had to be won over before they agreed to work for anyone. Dave grimaced because he could feel the griffin's fierce resistance. In the end, the connection broke because the griffin was able to overpower Dave's will. The chubby boy almost collapsed on the ground because he received a strong backlash from the contractual ceremony. It was a good thing that William was standing beside him and hurriedly supported his body. I can't do it. It's too strong, Dave said as he panted for breath. The griffin had a smug expression on its face as he looked at the chubby boy. Deep down, it was sneering at him for trying to bite off more than he could chew. Don't worry. William patted his shoulder. I promise to help you get a griffin, and I will keep my promise. Someone bring me a spear. One of the students hurriedly took out a spear from his storage ring in order to get into William's good graces. He felt envious of Dave's lucky break and he hoped that he would get the same treatment if he showed his loyalty to William. Sir, here is a spear bought with 2,000 gold coins, the young noble said with a smile. I hope that it can be of good use to you. This spear has a good quality, William replied. Thanks. Because you acted swiftly, I will allow you to be the first to choose which hippogriff you want to be your mount after they are fully healed. Thank you, Commander, the young noble bowed and backed away with satisfaction. William pointed the tip of the spear to the eye of the griffin. The latter looked back in defiance and gave William the go-ahead and kill me. I'd rather die than become a human's mount, Claire. You have two options, William announced. Submit and become Dave's partner or suffer. The griffin uttered a screech in defiance. It would rather die than submit. Good. Let's see how strong your resolve is. William grinned evilly as he walked towards the rear of the beast. The red-headed boy twirled the spear until the blunt end of the spear was facing the griffin's bum. Requiescat in pace. William shouted as he thrust the spear towards the griffin's B***ed hole without mercy. A loud shriek filled with pain and shock reverberated in the whimsical forest. The beasts who heard it unconsciously shielded their rear because they somehow felt that it was the appropriate thing to do. You dare to reject a knight of my order? Who gave you the courage? William roared as he thrust the spear for the second time. You think I'll let you die? I have plenty of healing potions here. We can do this all day. Let's see how long you last. The griffin's pitiful shrieks echoed in the whimsical forest for a good 15 minutes before it stopped completely. Damien's and Gideon's hands were shielding their bums and their expressions were filled with fear. God *MN it. He is really the commander's grandson. Damien gasped. Gideon nodded his head in agreement. Both of them are shameless bastards who will do anything to get their way. The girls of the order had long ago averted their gaze. Even Priscilla wasn't able to stomach William's approach to taming magical beasts. The young noble who had given William the spear couldn't stop his lips from twitching. If he only knew that his 2,000 gold spear would be used in this manner, he would have given William a cheaper one instead. I'll ask you again, William grinned as he faced the pitiful griffin. Are you going to submit? Or must I continue? The griffin hurriedly nodded like a chicken pecking rice. It threw away its dignity and submitted to William's will. The hippogriffs, on the other hand, were all shivering. All of them were thinking of the same thing. If I had rejected his offer to be tamed, would I have ended up receiving the same treatment? The magical beasts felt that they had saved themselves the trouble of getting hurt by agreeing to be part of William's herd. If not, they might have suffered the same fate as their mortal enemy. Damien did the contractual ceremony once again, and this time, the griffin didn't resist. It was even giving Dave the hurry and just get it over with. I don't want that crazy bastard to peg me again, I signal. After the contract was established, Dave and the griffin felt a strong connection to each other. This was the bond that was shared between the beast companions and their masters. William patted Dave's shoulder and gave the griffin the antidote to overcome the paralysis. After the magical beast was able to stand up again, the red-headed boy then walked towards the noble that gave him the spear. I'm returning it, William said. Thank you very much. The young noble looked at the dirted spear in his commander's hand and almost cried a river. He knew that he wouldn't be able to wield that spear again due to the scene he'd just witnessed. His mental trauma would not allow him to be able to accept holding such a weapon in his hands. Why, you can have it, Commander, the young noble replied bitterly. Consider it as a gift from your subordinate. William looked at the young noble and felt that the boy was a very good person. Because of this, he decided to give him a reward at a later time. Very well, since you feel that way then I will keep this spear as a token of your friendship. William nodded and stored the weapon inside his ring. Let's return to the camp, William ordered. We will continue our exploration tomorrow. Yes sir. Cid, Aerith and Henry looked at William with complicated expressions. Just like Cid and Aerith, Henry was there to observe William's actions. He would then report these happenings to the Sword Saint as per the latter's order. The Sword Saint was very curious about William's potential, so he allowed him to hunt freely inside his domain. Also, he deemed that it would be best to equip the new Knight Order with mounts so that they would be able to perform well in the war that was estimated to happen in just a few short months. Ah! Dave fell off the griffin's back for the umpteenth time as the latter walked towards the encampment. William suggested that Dave get used to riding his new mount as part of his training. However, since he was a commoner by birth, he wasn't able to get the opportunity to ride domestic animals like horses and the likes. The griffin looked at his new partner in disdain as if telling him you can't even sit on my back properly and you wanted me to become your mount? What an idiot. William grinned when he saw Dave's pitiful expression. He then ordered the rest of the group to continue walking to the camp while he had a private talk with Dave. Damien and Gideon also stayed behind. Their orders were clear and they were to observe their young master and make sure he didn't get into trouble. When the other members of his group were no longer around, William walked towards the dejected Dave. Dave, do you want to be able to ride your partner without falling down? William asked. Yes, Dave replied. Sir, can you help me do that? Well, it's not like I can't help you, but I don't know if it will work. Are you willing to give it a try? I trust Sir William. I am willing to try anything as long as I can be a proper knight. William's expression suddenly became serious. Damien, Gideon, make sure that no one will be able to spy on me. What I am about to do is confidential. Make sure that no one will witness it. Very well, young master. Damien agreed. All right. Gideon nodded. Both of them disappeared from where they stood as they created a protective perimeter around William. Ezio, who was hiding in the shadows, also extended his help and made sure that no one would be able to interfere with whatever William was about to do. Dave, before we start, you are going to sign another contract, William said as he presented a scroll in his hand. You are not allowed to tell anyone anything about what you are going to witness today. That includes you, Mr. Griffin. The Griffin hurriedly nodded its head in understanding. It already knew how unreasonable William could be, and it didn't want to experience it a second time. Okay, I need both of your blood, William ordered. Both the boy and the Griffin obeyed without question and allowed William to get some of their blood. After the scroll glowed and the contract was completed, the red-headed boy took out a spear from his storage ring. This spear was not the common spear that was used in battle. Instead, it was a justing lance used by mounted cavaliers. The main body of the lance had a silvery blue color with runic patterns and looked utterly majestic. Its handle was golden in color and had several runic patterns inscribed on its body. William held the lance upwards using both of his hands. The half-elf was wearing the clothing of a nobleman and with the lance in his hand, he looked like a noble who held a lot of authority in his hands. Kneel, William ordered. Dave had an understanding look on his face, and kneeled with his left knee like a proper knight and bowed his head. William lowered the lance and lightly tapped Dave's left shoulder. In the name of the god of all trades, Gavin, and the goddess of knights, Astrid, I give you the right to bear arms and the power to meet justice, William said with a righteous countenance. May you protect the innocent and use your strength to uphold the honor of your sovereign and people. The lance glowed once as if empowering William's words. Dave saw a string of words appear inside his mind and said them out loud. I, Dave Cornwell, hereby solemnly obey as a knight of the Anglo-Ryan War Sovereign. William smiled and lightly tapped Dave's right shoulder before raising his lance once more towards the sky. Rise, my knight, and uphold the oath that you have made today, William stated. May your courage, and bravery, illuminate the world for eternity. Rongominiad, the lance that illuminates the world, showered Dave with a golden brilliance. The king chess piece within William's sea of consciousness glowed thrice before returning to its normal state. A series of words appeared in William's status page which caught him completely by surprise. First Knight of the Anglo-Ryan War Sovereign has been registered. Name, Dave Cornwell. Bestowing Knight title. Appropriate title found. Dave Cornwell, the Crusader of the Sky. Chapter 197, Can we talk in private? William thought that Dave's title was really cool as he stared at the young boy in front of him who seemed different from before. Dave could feel a certain strength inside his body that he couldn't explain. However, this time around, he felt that he could ride the griffin without falling off its back. The chubby boy raised his hand and the griffin unconsciously lowered its body to allow him to mount. Dave then confidently sat on its back as if he had done it countless times before. After seating securely in place, he then patted the back of his partner as if telling him to stand. When the griffin rose to its feet, it felt that his rider was very different from the one who mounted him a few minutes ago. It was as if the one riding him right now was a completely different person. William's jaw almost dropped when he saw another change on his status screen. Name, Dave Cornwell. Race, human. Health points, 10,000/10,000. Mana, 3,000/3,000. Prestige job class, Crusader of the Sky, LVL1. Strength, 30, +10. Agility, 25, +10. Vitality, 40, +10. Intelligence, 20, +10. Dexterity, 40, +10. Skills. Dual X. Union of Man and Beast. Tactician. Tornado Descent. Shield Boomerang. Grand Cross. Title, Storm Rider. Storm Rider. During a storm all stats increase by 100%. Aerial mobility increase by 200%. Can use Heaven's Fury once a day. FCK. What kind of BS is this? William cursed out loud. He almost dropped Rongominiad from his hands as he read Dave's status page. Why is he so OP? Dave and the Griffin were both startled by William's shout and looked at their commander with anxious faces. After his initial outburst, William immediately calmed down and returned the legendary spear inside his storage ring. He then looked at Dave with a dazzling smile that would put all scammers to shame. You're good, William said as he lightly patted Dave's leg. He then patted the Griffin who trembled under his touch. You're also good. The newly appointed Crusader and his mount felt the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. For some reason, they felt that they were about to be served on a silver platter and William was going to eat them. Dave, from now on, I expect good things from you, William said with a serious expression. Do not tarnish the honor of the Anglo-Ryan war sovereign. Do I make myself clear? Why yes. I swear that I will not let you down, Commander. Dave stuttered. The Griffin shrieked to support his partner's words. It was afraid that if it didn't say anything, William would find an excuse to torture it. Good, let's go, William ordered as he mounted Ella's back. Dave and the Griffin glanced at each other as they walked behind Ella's back. After walking for a while, the chubby boy and the magical beast both realized that Dave was no longer in danger of falling from the Griffin's back. It was as if they were joined together. What he didn't know was that after acquiring the prestige class Crusader of the Sky he automatically acquired the skill union of man and beast. This was a special skill of the Cavalier job class which allowed the rider and his mount to become a single unit when they were together. Even if the Griffin were to perform complicated aerial maneuvers, Dave wouldn't fall off its back even if he wasn't sitting on a specialized saddle. When the two arrived at the camp, both of them were met with curious gazes. The other members of the Anglo-Ryan war sovereign felt that Dave had changed somehow, but they couldn't put their finger on it. What impressed them the most was that the chubby boy was riding on top of the Griffin as if he had done it for many years. There was also a sense of confidence that was oozing from Dave's body which made the others look at him in a different light. What happened to you? Conrad asked the chubby boy after he dismounted from the Griffin. What did you do with the commander? Dave gave Conrad a refreshing smile before answering his question. Sorry, but the commander ordered me not to say anything. But... Conrad waited for Dave to continue his words. But, I hope the day will come when you will become part of Sir William's strength, Dave said with a serious expression. I look forward to that day. After saying those words, Dave walked past Conrad and headed towards William. He stood a few meters away from him like a trusted retainer. Everyone was a little confused when they noticed this sudden change in Dave's mannerism. Usually, he would stick around Conrad. However, this time around, they could tell that he had switched his allegiance to William and seemed very satisfied with it. William didn't say anything, and ordered everyone to rest while he checked on the conditions of the hippogriffs. After close inspection, he realized that 4 of them had lost a limb or 2 and had to be supported by their comrades using ropes, tied to their bodies. Those that had suffered serious injuries had been given high-grade potions that William had acquired from their bandit raids. He didn't bat an eye and used them on the injured creatures which made the new members of his herd very grateful. The total number of mounts they gained from this expedition was 16. William had 6 officers and 36 subordinates. He planned to have all of them get a mount of their own, which meant that he had to return to the whimsical forest and find a new herd of hippogriffs. While he was deep in his thoughts, he heard 2 sets of footsteps approaching from behind his back. He didn't turn his head and simply waited for his 2 guests to speak their mind. Can we talk in private? Cid asked. Okay, William replied. He turned his head to look at the disciples of the Sword Saint with a calm expression. Follow me. Cid and Aerith nodded as they followed William. The 3 people walked towards a small brook that was 100 meters away from their encampment. William didn't know why the 2 wanted to talk to him, but he was willing to hear them out for the sake of the Sword Saint's generosity. After arriving at their destination, Cid cleared his throat and spoke his mind. What you did earlier was admirable. However, you shouldn't mingle with demonic beasts who specialize in dark magic, Cid said with a serious expression. I don't know why that demonic dog is helping you, but if others find out that you are collaborating with such a creature, your reputation will get a black stain. William nodded his head. He already expected this situation after forming a contract with Psoglov. If it was only the members of his Night Order, he could probably force them to keep their mouths shut. Unfortunately, there were outsiders present in the area, so this outcome was understandable. Also, you should hide that slave collar on your neck, Cid stated. You are a noble and a noble wearing a slave collar is taboo. Although slavery runs rampant in the Hellan kingdom, the king himself dislikes such practices. William snorted. The king might feel that way, but the nobles don't. Almost all of the nobles own slaves of their own. The collar on my neck is my way of telling them that even nobles can be enslaved. If it can happen to me, what makes them think that it couldn't happen to them? The red-headed boy also wanted to point out that their honorable master was keeping slaves inside his residence. He just didn't mention it to prevent conflicts between him and the Sword Saint's disciples. Even so, you mustn't openly show it to the public like it's a priceless accessory, Aerith insisted. Looking at you makes me feel uncomfortable. William grinned evilly as he looked at Aerith from head to toe. Indeed. You should feel uncomfortable. A beauty like you would sell for a high price if you ever fell into the hands of slave traders. A resounding slap echoed in the air as Aerith looked at her hand in surprise. I am sorry, I didn't mean to, Aerith stuttered. Don't worry, I've suffered worse, William replied. A red handprint slowly materialized on the half-elf's handsome cheek. It was the mark left by Aerith's unconscious action after hearing William's words. Is there anything else that the 2 of you need to say to me? William inquired. If not, then I will return to the camp. There are still a few things that I need to do as the leader of this expedition. Cid stared hard at William for a quarter of a minute before shaking his head. Aerith looked apologetic and lowered her head in guilt. William nodded his head in understanding and walked past the 2 teenagers who were older than him. But as he was passing Aerith, the shepherd lightly patted her shoulder before leaving her with some parting words. I am, also, not a fan of slavery and one of my goals is to fully eradicate it from the southern continent. The 2 disciples of the Sword Saint watched William's retreating back as he returned to the encampment. What a peculiar boy, Cid said as his gaze sharpened like swords. What do you think, big sister? Deep down, Cid was reluctant to admit that William had won their duel. But facts showed that even if he was the stronger between the two, the boy's tenacity and unwavering determination overpowered his skill with the sword. I think he needs to be re-educated in the proper etiquette of noble families, Aerith replied. Her expression was dyed red due to embarrassment from her earlier outburst. He is indeed weaker than you, but for some reason, I feel that even if you two had a rematch, the outcome would still be the same. Cid sighed as a bitter smile appeared on his face when he heard his sister's words. He didn't agree nor disagree with her opinion, but his silence was enough to tell her that he also felt the same way. This was the first time that the two of them had met someone as mysterious as William. On the surface, he acted in a carefree manner. Just like a sword during peacetime. However, during times of emergencies, his attitude changed completely. Like a fully drawn blade with exquisite sharpness, he was able to cut down the obstacles blocking his way. The two finally understood the real reason why their master had sent them to observe William. He wanted them to learn that not all battles were honorable. In a fight of life and death, honor and dignity were merely beautiful decorations. Someday, I will win against him, Cid muttered softly. Aerith, who was by her brother's side, nodded her head. She, too, wanted her brother to be hailed as the strongest in the southern continent, just like their master. However, as she looked at the small retreating back in the distance, she felt that the hurdle that her brother was about to face was a mountain that towered above the mortal realm. A mountain whose peak could never be conquered. Chapter 198, Bastion of the Chiron Tribe. The next day, Henry took William and half of his subordinates to the whimsical forest to look for hippogriffs once again. Dave was tasked with guarding their encampment, along with the 6 people in his team. The injured hippogriffs they had captured the day before were in their encampment and someone had to guard them to ensure that they were not attacked by wandering beasts. Since the griffin was there to act as a deterrence, William could leave their encampment with peace of mind. Oh. I see. Thank you very much. William said. The deer in front of him bleated softly as it ran towards the depths of the forest. The territory of the second group of hippogriffs is a mile away in that direction, William stated as he pointed northeast. Let's go. Aerith walked beside William with a curious expression. Did you just talk to a deer? William hummed his reply as he continued to walk. How did you learn their language? It's a shepherd's trade secret. Aerith frowned as she continued to trail behind William. Do all shepherds know how to talk to their animals? To a certain extent, yes, William replied. It takes patience and years of herding to learn the skill. Can you teach me? I've always wanted to communicate with animals. It would be best if you learn from a druid. I can only talk to beasts that belong to the herd. William couldn't possibly tell Aerith that his ability to talk to animals was inherited from his elven bloodline. Just like his mother was able to talk to Skyla, William was only able to communicate with beasts that belonged to the herd. Ironically, cranes also belonged to the herd category. This was why the red-headed boy was able to communicate with Skyla properly. While walking in the direction of the hippogriff's territory, a small wren landed on William's shoulder and began chirping. Dia looked at the small bird and hesitated. She didn't know if she should eat it or not. Don't eat her, William said softly to Dia. He then glanced at the small bird and started to communicate with it. Because William replied using chirping sounds, the wren on his shoulder chirped more excitedly. 5 minutes later, the bird flew away leaving William with a troubled expression. After pondering for a while, he signaled for everyone to stop. Don't make any sounds, I will check something first, William ordered as he climbed to the top of a tree. When he reached the highest branch, he narrowed his eyes and stared in the direction of the north. Several birds could be seen fleeing in different directions as the trees swayed in the distance. The wren had told him that a group led by a very strong beast was headed in the direction they were going. When William asked the little bird descriptions about the creature, it only said that it was big and had wings. The thing that worried William more was that the bird told him that it was not alone. There were at least 3 of them. As William focused his attention to the north, the beast that his little friend had warned him about finally appeared in his vision. Wyverns, William muttered as he saw 3 wyverns rise from the treetops carrying wild boars in their claws. The biggest among the 3 wyverns screeched and flew towards the north. The other 2 wyverns followed behind their leader as they continued their hunt. Wyvern. Pseudo-dragon. Threat level, A, high. Cannot be added to the herd. It is said that wyverns descended from the bloodline of dragons. Has very high aerial maneuverability and boasts incredible fighting prowess. Their tails have a poison stinger that is capable of inflicting poison strong enough to kill a human in minutes. Wyverns are able to use breath attacks similar to dragons. However, the damage of this energy attack is weaker compared to pure blood dragons. This creature has the ability to further evolve and become a variety of stronger monsters. Some of their evolutions include blood wyverns, storm wyverns, frost wyverns, fire wyverns, and several other species depending on their location. All evolved wyverns are of centennial rank and must be treated with great caution. Fortunately they found the boars before they found the hippogriffs, William thought as he watched the majestic creatures fly away. Now I understand why Conrad wanted a wyvern as his mount. When Conrad told William that he wanted a wyvern as his mount, his first reaction was to give the older boy the middle finger. Conrad also understood that he was asking for too much, but he was the type of person that liked to aim high for whatever thing he wanted in life. William had already told him that he didn't have the ability to capture a wyvern at this point in time, but if ever an opportunity arose, he promised that he would do his best to cater to Conrad's choice of mount. Although William was tempted to ask Ezio, Damien, and Gideon for help, he decided to not move forward with this plan. If possible, he wanted to capture the wyvern using his own ability and the manpower under his disposal. I'm sure Psoglov would immediately run tail if he was summoned to fight against a wyvern. William chuckled at the thought of seeing the demonic dog running away in fear after it was summoned in front of a wyvern's gaping jaw. After the short interlude, William and the rest of his group went deeper inside the mythical forest. They saw various creatures eyeing them from a distance, but none of them made any move to attack each other. Although humans often wandered inside the forest, most of them were strong individuals. This was why the beasts merely observed the shepherd's group and made no attempt to hunt them down. After an hour of walking, they finally arrived at a meadow with a steadily flowing brook. The meadow was quite big and William estimated that it was at least a mile long. Several beasts like deer, moose, and wild bison grazed peacefully in the distance. Not far from their location were the magical creatures that William and his group sought after. It was none other than a herd of hippogriffs. Compared to the one that they had first met, the members of this group numbered more than 100. The alpha of the group stood in the middle and eyed William's group with a calm gaze. Before William could even walk towards the alpha hippogriff to talk, a rumbling sound was heard not far from them. From the depths of the forest, a platoon of centaurs carrying pikes and bows charged in William's direction. The half-man, half-horse creatures stopped 20 meters away from the humans and eyed them with vigilance. Centaur. Humanoid creatures. Threat level, C, mid. Can be added to the herd. Success rate, 20%. A centaur has the body of a horse topped by a humanoid torso, head, and arms. Most of them avoid conflict but fight fiercely when forced to do so. They are experts in melee and ranged combat. Their preferred weapons are spears, pikes, and bows. Some of them are born with the ability to wield magic but these are very rare cases. What are you humans doing here within the territory of our Chiron tribe? A centaur carrying a silver spear, and wearing a silver helmet, asked in a booming voice. Chiron tribe? Are you that same tribe that the Sword Saint allowed to settle in these lands? Cid asked back. The centaur snorted and faced the Sword Saint's disciple with arrogance. Allowed to settle in these lands? Boy, you'd better watch your mouth. Or else, I will be more than happy to cut out that tongue of yours. You can try, Cid replied. The boy was about to unsheath his sword, but was held back by William's hand. What did I say about not getting in the way of our mission? William asked with a smile. I'll handle this. Everyone, don't draw your weapons. The half-elf stepped forward and addressed the person who seemed to be the leader of the Centaurian platoon. My name is William von Ainsworth, William announced. May I know your excellency's name? The centaur captain looked at William with a frown. His instinct was telling him that the boy in front of him was not an enemy, but a friend. However, he had met a lot of humans in the past and all of them were sly creatures who not only stepped on their kindness, but even captured their tribe members in order to sell them as slaves. In short, the centaurs inside the whimsical forest were wary of humans and would usually repel them whenever they met them in the forest. You can call me Bastion of the Chiron tribe, Bastion answered. What is your purpose for coming to our territory? Before I answer your question, may I know your relationship with the hippogriffs? William inquired. Bastion and the rest of the centaurs immediately took a fighting stance as they glared at William. So you are here to capture hippogriffs, Bastion said in contempt. As expected of the greedy humans. All you know how to do is make the creatures of the forest your mounts or slaves. Wait. You are making a very big misunderstanding here. William raised both of his arms in order to calm the centaurs who were about to engage them in battle. First of all, I'm not a human. I'm a half-elf. Secondly, I came here to negotiate with the alpha of the hippogriffs and not forcefully take the members of its herd away. While William was explaining his reason for coming, the golden-winged hippogriff had walked towards his location and raised its head arrogantly towards the foreigners who entered its domain. I was already informed by Gyros about your purpose for coming, the alpha hippogriff said via telepathy. The answer is no. I will not allow you to take any member of my herd and be used as mounts. The alpha screeched hatefully at William, while Bastion held his spear firmly in his hand. The hippogriff had allowed him to listen to its reply to William because both of them had made an alliance. As allies, it was only natural for both of them to stand against the intruders that had entered their domain. Chapter 199, Your name will be Ethon. In fact, it was not only the hippogriffs that were allied with the centaurs. All the creatures that were grazing in the meadow were part of their alliance as well. This was why the centaurs appeared when William's group arrived in the meadow. The wild bison, moose, and deer had already trapped William's group in an encirclement and were only waiting for Bastion's order to attack. The only reason why they were still being civil was because of the fact that William was radiating a presence that made them not want to have a conflict with him if possible. Leave. Bastion ordered. This is your last warning. The next time you return, we will treat you as enemies. William sighed internally because they were left with no other option but to leave the meadow. Okay, we will leave. William nodded his head. He then turned to his group and made a hand gesture. Let's go. Cid and Aerith were frowning, but they still followed William's orders. William's group retreated a mile away from the meadow and formed a temporary camp. It was only lunchtime, so there was plenty of time to think of their next course of action. William was currently resting on top of a branch with his back leaning against the tree. He didn't want to engage in a full-blown confrontation with the centaurs and their allies because the latter treated them in a civil manner, despite the fact that they went there to capture some hippogriffs. There must be a way, but how? William pondered as he gazed at the northeast. While he was mulling over his options, the wren that chatted with him earlier perched on his shoulder and began chirping. Oh. Chirp. How many? Chirp. William crossed his arms over his chest as he digested the information that was given to him by the little bird. Say, do you want to travel together with me? Chirp. Yes. Our meeting must be fate, William said with a smile. Although you are very small, you are quite capable of gathering news. How about you work for me as my news informer? Chirp. If you come with me, you'll never go hungry again. I promise you. The wren thought for a while before chirping in affirmation. William grinned and added the small bird to his herd. Wren. Common bird. The wren is a tiny brown bird, although it is heavier and not as slim as the even smaller goldcrest. It is dumpy, almost rounded, with a fine bill, quite long legs and toes, very short round wings and a short, narrow, tail which is sometimes cocked up vertically. For such a small bird it has a remarkably loud voice. Let me think of a good name for you, William said as he rubbed the little bird's head. The little bird looked at William in anticipation as it waited for its name. After giving it much thought, the red-headed boy finally thought of a good name for the little guy who stumbled upon them in the forest. Ethon, William smiled. From now on, your name will be Ethon. The king chess piece in William's sea of consciousness glowed thrice and a small change appeared on the wren's body. A golden crest appeared on Ethon's chest. It was like a small marking that allowed William to identify him from birds of the same species. After adding Ethon to his ever-growing herd, William climbed down from the tree and shared the news he just received. We need to leave the forest, William announced. A tribal war among the beast groups is about to take place. We don't want to get caught in the crossfire, so we'd better leave as soon as possible. The young noble that had offered the spear to William a day ago raised his hand. Commander, what about the mounts? Worry not, my dear comrade, William said with a mischievous smile. I'm sure that we will be able to snatch a few creatures during their internal conflict. For now, let's go back to the camp and wait for the aftermath. Ethon had told him that the fight would be breaking out any moment and the sooner they left, the better. If William was alone, he was confident that he would be able to maneuver freely in the forest. However, since his subordinates were with him, he didn't dare to act boldly. It was best to return to their encampment first then sneak back inside the forest to play the fishing game. Ella, Dia, Ragnar and Ethon looked at William with a knowing glance. Since they were part of his herd, they could understand his thoughts to a certain extent. He was already looking forward to the grand hall that was about to take place. No good. The young master is really similar to the commander, Damien whispered to Gideon who was seated behind him. Look at that smug expression on his face. That is what commander looks like when he is just about to raid a bandit camp and steal their treasures. You're right, Gideon whispered back. I have a feeling that he will drag the two of us along as well. If he really is the commander's grandson, he will throw away his dignity and become shameless. As if feeling their gazes, William glanced at the two men and gave them a refreshing smile. That smile alone confirmed the two men's suspicions that the brat was up to no good. Kenneth sat beside William and tapped his shoulder. Whatever you are planning on doing, take me along. William looked at his roommate with a curious gaze. What do you mean? I can tell that you are scheming something. Nonsense. Just look at this handsome and innocent face of mine. Does it look like the face of a schemer? Kenneth nodded his head. Not only the face of a schemer, but the face of a scammer as well. How rude. Looks like my secretary is going through a rebellious phase. William grinned. Very well, I will agree to take you with me on one condition. On one condition. Yes. Kenneth thought for a while before nodding his head. Let me hear the condition. William motioned for him to come closer as he whispered something in the delicate boy's ears. Kenneth frowned, but still nodded his head in agreement. Very well. I accept this condition. Good. William patted his roommate's shoulder. We are going to move tonight. Make sure not to alarm the others when we sneak out of the encampment. Later that night, William, Ella, Kenneth, Damien, and Gideon headed deeper inside the whimsical forest. They had just traveled a mile into the forest when they heard the distant roars of beasts. Looks like we just arrived in time, William said as he made a hand gesture for everyone to stop. Ragnar was currently seated on top of Ella's back with his tongue lolling outside of his mouth. Dia, on the other hand, was resting on William's head, while Ethon was perched on his shoulder. William raised his hand and a portal appeared beside him. Psaglov, the demonic dog, arrived with a smirk plastered on his face. Are we going to start our hunt? Psaglov asked as its single eye glowed eerily in the darkness. William nodded in acknowledgement. Tonight is a bit special. If we get lucky, we will strike it big time. Oh. Psaglov rubbed its chin with its clawed hand. I like the sound of that. It then raised its head and listened to the roars of the beasts in the forest. A faction war. Psaglov chuckled. I love faction wars. It is the best time to snag some easy prey. William and the demonic dog shared a knowing glance before running towards the north. It was the place where the strongest conflict was currently taking place. Ella, Kenneth, Damien, and Gideon followed behind them. Since William was a half-elf, his dark vision allowed him to see perfectly in the night. For some reason, this ability of his was shared with the entire herd, and allowed Ella and the others to see clearly in the dark as well. As for Kenneth, Damien, and Gideon, they had their own ways to see in the dark and kept up with William's and Psaglov's advance towards their destination. When they arrived, they were just in time to see a fierce battle being fought between the centaurs and a group of wyverns. After observing the pseudo-dragon's rampage, William noticed a unique individual among the group. The wyvern's body was red in color, and there was a crimson crystal embedded in its forehead. William used his appraisal skill on the creature and his face suddenly became serious. It had been a while since he faced off against a creature of such rank, and he knew that it was a steel plate that he didn't dare to kick. Blood wyvern. Pseudo-dragon. Centennial beast. Threat level, S, high. Cannot be added to the herd. The blood wyvern is one of the evolutions of a wyvern. It has the ability to continuously grow stronger by drinking the blood of magical creatures. This wyvern has the ability Bloodthirst, which allows it to identify the location of any warm-blooded creature within 2 square miles with it as its center. Even those with the stealth or invisibility skills will not escape its sight. It also has the ability Skill Absorption that allows it to acquire the skills of the creatures it has consumed. The blood wyvern can evolve into a crimson wyvern once it has stepped into the ranks of millennial beasts. A wyvern known for its brutality and strength that can even overpower pure-blooded dragons of the same rank. Chapter 200, The Fisherman's Game Part 1. That one is one nasty beast, Psoglov commented as his single eye locked on the blood wyvern that was currently circling around the centaur tribe. The blood wyvern was currently fighting against the top dog of the centaur tribe who was also of the centennial rank. However, not all creatures of the same rank were equal. There would always be racial differences between the two which would decide who had the upper hand or not. Centaur War Chieftain. Humanoid creature. Centennial beast. Threat level, S, mid. Can be added to the herd. Success rate, 1%. William briefly glanced at the information of the Centaur War Chieftain. Basically, it was a centaur that boasted the highest combat skills within the tribe. Right now, that same centaur was keeping the blood wyvern at bay using magical range attacks. However, that was exactly what the blood wyvern intended it to do. As long as the war chieftain focused on it, the other wyverns would be able to decimate the rest of the tribe using their superior strength. Although the centaur tribe numbered around 2,000, the majority of them were Class C creatures with only a dozen Class B warriors at most. Wyverns were one of the apex predators in the whimsical forest, and even though the centaurs had the advantage in numbers, it was futile against their enemy. While the battle was ongoing, a loud shriek pierced the air and 50 hippogriffs appeared on the battlefield. They were allied with the centaurs and it was only natural to lend their assistance during times of need. Currently, there were 15 wyverns circling the tribal camp and some of their claws and beaks were already dyed in blood. Clearly, they had killed a good number of centaur warriors during the clash and had gorged on their enemy's blood to regain their strength. William recognized Damien leading a troop of centaurs while shooting arrows towards the wyverns. These arrows harmlessly bounced off the wyvern's scales, which made the centaurs grit their teeth in frustration. When the hippogriffs arrived, the battle was no longer one-sided, but the invaders still had the upper hand. William sighed as 2 hippogriffs were impaled by the wyvern's stinger and crashed toward the ground. Naturally, they couldn't possibly interfere in the war directly, so the 2 hippogriffs died not long after their fatal crash. So, what's the plan? Psoglov asked as he crossed his arms over his chest. Although I can't defeat any of those wyverns, I am confident that as long as the blood wyvern doesn't interfere, I will be unharmed. Psoglov was about to say more when they heard high-pitched chuckling sounds coming from the forest. The centaurs grimaced as they saw one of the most annoying beasts that lived within the forest, and that was none other than the were hyenas. Just like the name suggests, they were quite similar to werewolves, but the difference was that they were hyenas instead of wolves. William frowned as he, once again, used his appraisal skill to identify the newcomers. Were hyena. Therianthropic hybrid. Threat level, C, mid. Cannot be added to the herd. A powerful scavenger that feasts on the flesh of both humans and beasts. This creature has 3 forms, a human form, a large hyena, or a hybrid that is similar to a werewolf. Unlike werewolves who can only transform during the night, were hyenas can transform any time of the day and don't have many restrictions like the other therianthropic hybrids. Strong and sly, these creatures are one of the most annoying beasts that one can encounter in the southern continent. The were hyenas' high-pitched laughter made the already hopeless situation unbearable. They ran towards the location where the 2 hippogriffs had fallen and immediately dragged their dead bodies away. They didn't go far before they started to feast on the hippogriff's flesh. They had a very strong resistance to poison, so even the wyvern's poison that had killed the magical beasts wasn't a concern to them. Psoglov whistled as he looked at the new arrivals with admiration. Now things have become more complicated, Psoglov chuckled. What are we going to do now, shepherd? William assessed the situation carefully and knew that he wouldn't be able to turn the tides with his current power. Since that was the case, it was now time to borrow the power of others. Fourth Master, can you lend me your assistance, just this once? William asked. Kenneth and the Psoglov looked at him in confusion because they didn't know who this Fourth Master was. A soft rustling sound was heard beside the tree opposite them and a man wearing a hooded robe appeared out of thin air. What do you have in mind? Ezio asked. Ezio officially became William's 4th master after the boy had succumbed to the dark side of humanity. He taught the half-elf many things, including the art of torturing people. Among William's masters, Ezio was a man of few words. When talking to him, William had to get straight to the point in order to save time. 4th master, can you deal with the blood wyvern? William asked. This was the most pressing matter right now. As long as the blood wyvern was defeated, the centaur war chief would be able to deal with the other wyverns quite easily. I can, but I will need some help, Ezio replied as he glanced at his 2 comrades who were sent by their commander. Damien and Gideon just nodded their heads in understanding. They would help Ezio deal with the blood wyvern, while William dealt with the rest. Be safe, young master, Damien said as he patted the boy's shoulder. Don't let the were hyenas bite you, Gideon commented. The commander will kill us if you turn into one of them. William nodded his head. Be at ease, seniors. After getting his reply, the 3 men disappeared. William didn't know where they were, but he was certain of one thing. The blood wyvern would soon be dealt with. Let's go, William said as he jumped off the tree. Kenneth and Psoglov followed suit and landed on the ground. Ella transformed into her war ibex form and allowed William and Kenneth to ride on her back. We will first join the centaurs and help them repel the war hyenas, William explained his plan. Psoglov, summon your doppelganger to help catch the hippogriffs just like you did yesterday. Leave the rest to me. All right, but I want a few cores from the war hyenas, Psoglov replied while stating his condition. Okay. I like dealing with smart people. Ella charged towards the battlefield while William fired arrows at the war hyenas that were closing in on the centaurs. The centaurs, on the other hand, glanced at Damien to wait for his orders. They didn't know whether to attack William or turn a blind eye on his actions. Don't mind him for now, Bastion ordered. Attack the war hyenas. The centaurs roared in acknowledgement and charged towards the annoying scavengers with their pikes and lances. The battle became more intense as both sides fought tooth and nail for supremacy. The centaurs were clearly at a disadvantage because the wyverns and the war hyenas seemed to be in cahoots with each other. Using their superior numbers, the centaurs chased away the war hyenas and managed to kill 6 of them. However, the war hyenas and the wyverns managed to kill more than 100 centaurs in the span of a few minutes. William waved his hand and shamelessly snatched the dead bodies of the war hyenas inside his storage ring. The centaurs were not in the mood to pay attention to his petty action because their entire tribe was at stake. Ella's horns embedded themselves in a war hyena that was about to deal the finishing blow to a fallen centaur. The creature shrieked in pain, but William's spear pierced its eyes, all the way through its brain, ending its life in the process. The war hyena's attack became frenzied, but William's and the centaurs' united assault overpowered their rabid attacks. Suddenly, a wyvern descended towards the war hyenas and the centaurs that were engaged in close combat and opened its jaws wide. It's going to fire its dragon breath. Damien shouted in order to warn William and their temporary allies. Flames erupted from the wyvern's mouth as it shot it towards the ground like a flamethrower. The centaurs immediately evaded, but some of them weren't able to react in time. A dozen warriors were incinerated by the flames and died while crying out painfully. Psoglov did his best to catch the falling hippogriffs, but most of them were already dead when he caught them. Unlike griffins, wyverns could easily tear a hippogriff in half due to its superior strength. Out of the 50 hippogriffs that joined the battle, 15 had already fallen, and Psoglov was only able to save 4. However, the 4 magical beasts were already in a near-death condition with their wings and limbs torn off from their bodies. One of them had been impaled by a wyvern stinger and was only a minute away from dying. William hurriedly added these beasts to his herd, and gave the dying hippogriff an antidote. One of the wyverns saw William's action and immediately dove down from the sky in order to kill him. When it was only 100 meters away from the boy, a silver steel thread wrapped around its body, stopping it in its tracks. Ezio, Damien, and Gideon jumped on its back and forcefully veered it to its right side. The wyvern was enraged by the sudden ambush it had received from the weak humans and tried to shrug them off from his back. Unfortunately, the 3 men riding on its back were its worst nightmare. Damien laughed as he clamped a collar on the wyvern's neck. After the collar was firmly locked in place, the wyvern froze in the air before rising to the sky. Damien was a beastmaster. Naturally, he could tame many kinds of beasts. His forte was taming flying creatures. Gideon was a beastmaster as well. However, his specialty was land-based creatures. Together, they formed a formidable team that could capture different beasts in both land and sky. Damien controlled the wyvern and sneakily approached one of its brethren. When he was close enough, the beastmaster jumped off from the wyvern's back and threw the silver steel thread towards the opposite wyvern's neck. The wyvern was busy dealing with the centaurs on the ground, so it didn't notice the beastmaster that had snuck up on it from behind. Just like the first wyvern, Damien easily took control of the second one. I can only control 2 of these beasts at a time, Damien said. The blood wyvern's rank is too high for me. I won't be able to capture it. Don't worry, just let me get close to it, Ezio replied. All right. Damien nodded his head as Ezio transferred to the wyvern he was currently controlling. Ezio's confident reply made Damien remember that this reclusive comrade of theirs was someone who could fight against centennial beasts alone. Ezio eyed the blood wyvern in the distance with a calm expression. However, deep down inside, he was feeling a sense of anticipation. Perhaps, it was because he had become so accustomed to killing people that he hadn't had the time to hunt down strong beasts as of late. Regardless of the reason, William's 4th master looked at the centennial beast with admiration. It's very rare to see a blood wyvern, even in the southern continent, Ezio mused. Killing it would be a waste.